Welcome, everyone. This is your friend, the DN What If, here with another exciting fanfiction. Today, we're diving into the story of what if Deku became the elusive villain known as Ghost? If you enjoy this video, don't forget to hit that like button and subscribe for more fanfiction content just like this. Now, let's get started with the fanfic. Hisashi Yamada, contrary to popular belief, was a smart man. Being one of 2 total students, Nedzu has personally taken a hand in teaching, and being the creature's child-in-law, he was smart. So yes, he noticed Midoriya yawning at the start of English right after lunch. The bruises under his eyes were more prevalent than they usually were, barely hiding under his massive freckles. The slightly drunk expression on his face like he just had the best cup of hot chocolate known to man. The way his limbs seemed to be like lead with the complete and utter lack of notes taken. And finally, when the boy used his right arm like a pillow, using his left to hide his face in the dark cocoon of comfort. At the start of the year, the boy shook and watched him like a bat, nervousness and anxiety permeating every ounce of his being. If he even looked in the direction of the boy, he'd practically hide from the man. The anxiety had lessened after the USJ and steadily decreased as he seemed to prove himself to the boy. Why was he so scared? Why did he flinch from reaching hands and the teacher's eyes? The boy faced down villains with a smile, but the seconds there was an adult with power, fear overtook him like a plague. Eyeing him snoozing comfortably on his desk unintentionally warmed Hisashi's heart, because if that wasn't a sign of trust, what was? The class ended soon enough, and when Midoriya's friends approached the sleeping boy, seemingly ready to wake him up, he called out, "Hey listeners," he spoke softly, making sure not to startle them. "It was just Todoroki and Ida right now. You can leave the lil listener with me. I'll call ahead to his next class. He looks like he needs it." "Are you sure?" Ida spoke, with no consideration for his volume. Hisashi grimaced. "Yeah, I'm sure listeners. It's just law and ethics, isn't it?" He raised a hand to his chin. "From what erasers told me, he's doing fine in the class. I'm sure he can just get the notes later." He offered a thumbs up to the 2 students and they just sighed. "All right, Mike-sensei." "Yes, Mike-sensei. I will take diligent notes for him." Ida's remark was accompanied by an aggressive hand chop that got a slight eyebrow raise from the younger Todoroki. "We will be on our way." "See that you do," he waved them off. He didn't have a last class PRD, meaning he didn't have to worry about anyone bothering the listener. Once the hallways were quiet again, the sign of the end of the passing PRD. He passed an amused glance over to the sleeping student before carefully turning off the lights in his room, closing the curtains, and grabbing the latest batch of English assignments. Nearing the end of the last PRD, where the regular students would head home and the hero students would head to foundational heroics, Hisashi eyed the listener who had barely even stirred. At some point, he'd managed to get a hoodie under the boy's head as a form of comfort, but it was obvious the kid was DMN exhausted. He carefully moved over, taking a seat at Bakuga's desk, and took a short breath before tapping the back of the kid's hand. "Hey lil listener, it's about time to wake up." It took nearly 5 minutes of poking and prodding before exhausted green eyes met his. The boy looked strikingly like a tired kitten with the way he was rubbing his eyes. "There you are." Mike-sensei?" came a hushed reply. The boy yawned immediately after, trying to blink the sleep from his eyes. He looked around slowly, taking in the empty classroom. "Did class end?" "Yeah, lil listener," he responded, equally soft. "You seem a bit tired though. Did you not sleep well last night?" "Too hungry," Midoriya murmured, laying his head back on his arm. "Couldn't sleep, lunch was so good." Hisashi felt his heart stutter at the unintentional confession. Midoriya had been so hungry he hadn't been able to sleep? "You had a good lunch then?" Hisashi asked softly and the kid nodded. "Lunch rush had a deal, so I could buy 3 of the entrees. That was curious." Hisashi hadn't heard of a deal. "So I ate." "Sounds like you had a good time," he decided. "You seem exhausted though. Why don't you come back to the teacher's offices and you can take a nap?" "A nap?" he murmured. "Maybe a lil one." "Yeah," Hisashi agreed. "A little one. My office is really quiet. Soundproof. And I can take a nap there?" His eyes were drooping at the mention of a nap. That sounds nice, and out like a light. Midoriya was back asleep, resting on his arm. Hisashi allowed himself to huff a small laugh of amusement before shifting. He had time to get him to the office. Hisashi was careful, throwing the boy's bag over his shoulder, "Holy F, that's heavy," before gently leaning down and sliding his arm under the boy's legs, and the other on his back as he slid him from the desk. The boy was lighter than he expected but still was built like a brick house. It wasn't terribly hard to get the boy lifted and out the door of his classroom. He nearly cooed when Midoriya leaned into him, kitten yawning, and grabbing his shirt. Finally, he reached the teacher's offices, carefully got the door to his, and Shuta's, office, and laid the boy down on the couch. The lights had been off already to his relief and the window was open, allowing a cool and gentle breeze to rest in the room. He gently laid the knitted blanket across from the room over the smaller students, but as he turned to leave, Hisashi nearly tripped back onto the couch and looked back to figure out what was happening. The kid had a death grip on his leather jacket, still asleep. He couldn't stop the huff of amusement that came out of him as he shifted the kid carefully and took a seat by his head. "You've got one hell of a grip," he snorted, more to himself than anything else. "All right, I'll hang out. Just chill out." 20 minutes later, the last class PRD had ended. Midoriya was still out cold. He was in no state to be doing foundational heroics. It was just a sparring class anyway if All Might followed the plans. He sighed and sent off a text to Shoyuta and Nedzu. "Loud bird, I've got a stray. Dad, I've already sent word he will be dismissed. By the way, Hisashi, Shoyuta is currently sprinting your way. He thinks you have a cat. Loud bird, that's so in character it's sad." On cue, his office door was slowly inched open. "That's not a cat," he helpfully observed. "It's not," Hisashi confirmed. "But now that I have you here, darling, can you hand me my assignments? I can't move." It was 7 p.m. when Midoriya finally woke up. Mike was watching some Netflix show while Aizawa sat grading some papers. "What does that even mean?" Aizawa grumbled under his breath. "I doesn't frog. I'm starting to think Kaminari isn't the only dyslexic one in the class." "Oh show, he does his best." In an instant, Midoriya shot up. "Oh, good morning, lil listener. Or evening, I suppose." Oh, he was hungry. Or dash, as eloquent as one who was just clinging to his English teacher could muster, he bowed. "I'm so sorry." "It was no problem, listener." He smiled. "You looked like you needed some sleep. By the time the school PRDS ended, you were out cold. I couldn't get you awake even if I tried," he chuckled. Midoriya became the world's best approximation of a strawberry as he bowed his head into his hands. "I'm so sorry." "Oh, Midoriya," Aizawa cut in, feeling bad for the kid. "We couldn't get a hold of you, Mom, to pick you up, which is why you're still here." "Any reason why?" "Double shift," he sighed, laying his head down on his knees. "I'm so sorry again. I'll get going home." Aizawa and Mike could only spare a glance at each other as the boy raced from the room. Concern bubbled through both of them for the small, green kid. The days continued on. The listener was exhausted. That was evident in the way he stood and nearly managed to keep himself awake. Hisashi could see it in the bags under his eyes and the way he kept reaching up to rub at his neck. Most of his friends seemed ignorant to it, but Todoroki was notably passing glances. Finally, classes were ending, meaning people would be heading home. Even the hero students were heading home as foundational heroics wasn't happening today. Midoriya dragged himself from his desk like a corpse. Like a breeze could push him over. Not a good sign. "Hey Midoriya. Lil listener, would you mind sticking around for a bit?" he chirped, flashing a smile. The class gasped. "Midoriya, what did you do?" Mina asked jokingly, dramatically covering her face with her hand. "Hopefully not something evil." "Did you bring another villain?" Jairu deadpanned. "I don't want another villain attack yet." The boy flushed at the sudden attention, desperately waving his hands to bring the attention away from his bright red face. "No, I didn't. I don't think so." His gaze turned slowly over to Hisashi with dread. "Did I bring another villain?" Hisashi burst out laughing, barely even trying to hide it. No, lil listener. He snorted, rubbing his eyes. Just about your assignment. I wanted to talk about it more in-depth with you. You make a nasty English tabloid. He shot finger guns to the kid. Not in trouble. The tension in the kid's shoulder bled out and he smiled to his friends. I'll see you guys on Monday then. The group shouted their goodbyes right back to the green-haired boy until the classroom was empty. Midoriya took a breath before approaching Hisashi. The teacher in question would have been impressed by Midoriya's mask if he wasn't so concerned. He smiled, letting his eyes gleam like they always would. A bit of determination and excitement in everything he does, but behind his eyes Hisashi could see nothing but exhaustion. What did you need with the tabloid assignment, Mike-sensei? The boy asked, polite as always. You want to pull up a chair, Green Bean? He tilted his head, hoping it came across as comforting. I got a little more to talk to you than about the assignment, which was hilarious by the way. A hint of nervousness entered the boy's eyes, but he quickly grabbed a chair and sat down by the teacher's desk. Did I do something wrong? The calmness was gone in an instant and he could see the tenseness in the boy's shoulders. His anxiety was almost palpable in the small room. Not at all, lil listener. He chirped. All right, I leave it to you what we talk about first. 1. The assignment, or 2. My concern. Confusion crossed the boy's face. Concern? Hisashi let his hero's smile soften into his normal one and carefully lowered his voice. Talking with Midoriya was often like approaching a stray cat. You had to be careful. One wrong step and he'd run. You look exhausted, kiddo. Have the last few days, but I didn't want to bug you if it was just an off week. His mind faintly trailed off to the day in his office. Have you been eating all right, kid? He had hit the nail on the head. It was evident by the way the kid tucked his head into his chest, avoiding Hisashi's eyes. The kid's hands began to twist around one another. Hisashi smiled softly and pulled his chair around to sit next to the kid. From the angle, he could see how utterly mutilated the kid's hands were. He'd need to address that too. Take a breath. It's all right, Midoriya. I only want to make sure you're getting what you need, he reassured. No judgment. The boy took in a short breath, before hiding behind his hair to talk. My lunch account is empty until next month. Normally I'd refill it on the 1st, but I had to pay a plumbing bill. And I haven't had enough to get food here or at home. Hisashi considered the words, a million questions spiraling through his head. When was the last time you got a full meal? He then asked softly. The boy tucked his head further as if trying to hide from judgment. Monday, he murmured. Hisashi grimaced. 4 days ago. That's when the leftover money on my account ran out. And with all the extra training I've been using my quirk. And it definitely has an effect on my metabolism. Hisashi took a moment to consider that all before taking a short breath in. All right, kiddo. I hear you. No judgment, I promised. He offers what he hopes is a comforting smile. I'm guessing you haven't been able to sleep well being so hungry? The boy nods, hiding his head in his chest. All right, we've got a few choices here then. Hisashi dug into his pocket before handing the kid a toy to fidget with. He eyed it warily for a moment before taking it instead of pulling his hands apart. We've got a scholarship program here for free food. It's called the Hero's Meal. He began to explain and got cut off. I don't qualify for scholarships usually, he murmured, tucking his head. And I wouldn't want to take it from someone who really needs it. I promise you, kiddo. Hisashi patted his head, hiding a smile when the kid leaned into it. Do you know the annual profit margins of this school? Out of this W-. On average, most private schools average a 6% profit. Midoriya started, hand moving to his chin as he began to mutter. And with UA being so prestigious with the tuition of 5.8 million yen. Without a scholarship and roughly 20 students per class with 10 major classes, 3 grades. Hisashi felt his eyes widen a bit at the kid's brain. Because holy shit. This was just supposed to be an example. There was a reason this kid was one of his favorites. So DMN smart. 3.5 billion yen on average? And a 6% profit on that would be 208 million? He bit his lip in thought. Yeah. About that. Right on the money, kiddo. Hizashi clapped. That's with our first scholarship program in place. A lot of students get free food. So we have money to spend to help our students. Our hero students especially. He was going to keep the pure skill of the kids' mental math in his mind because that was impressive. With the scholarship, you can get as much food as you need. Especially if your quirk has a metabolism aspect. I'm not taking it away from someone who needs it more. He spoke nervously. Nope. If someone else needs it, they can get it just as easily. The room went quiet as Midoriya thought, watching the fidget toy in his hands. Hizashi stayed quiet, allowing him time to process before he spoke. And, would I need my mom's permission for this? Hizashi paused. The Lil listener's mom had been a topic of concern for him personally for a while. He decided to shake it off as a thought for later. Nope. Just me or Eraser. As your UA representatives, it makes it easier for us to get stuff like this done inside, Tension bled from the kid. How's that sound? How long would it take to get put into place? We could do it right now. Hizashi smiled, standing. Come on along, listener. We can grab Eraser on the way. He bounced to his feet, stretching his arms into the air and listening to his back pop. Midoriya followed him quietly as they left the room, and Hizashi locked his door. Oh, and that tabloid you wrote? Absolutely hilarious. I was wondering, what would you say to it being posted professionally as a GG? April Fool's is coming up, after all. The absolute manic glee on the kid's face at the idea of such chaos was absolute gold. I'll take that as a yes? Yes. A baby Nedzu in the making, wonderful. Perfect. They arrived at the teacher's offices within a few minutes and Hizashi peeked in head in, before removing his glove to wave at Aizawa. Yuho! Eraser! The gruff man looked up from his cocooned state, face utterly blank. What? We've got a meeting with Nedzu. Some paperwork, he chirped, and the gruff man looked like he wanted to die. I have no heroics and I get dragged into this ethstish. He trailed off when he saw the bushel of green hair hiding behind Hizashi. He raised an eyebrow at his husband who mouthed back. It's important. Fine, Mike. He stood, carefully rewrapping his sleeping bag. I'm coming. Happy. Very. Hizashi gave a very in-character thumbs up to the two. Off to meet Nedzu then. He should have the papers we need in the office. Midoriya nodded, tucking his head again as anxiety set back in. Hizashi gave an empathetic glance as he felt Shoyuta tap against his shoulder. Adoption? It took all of Hizashi's training as a host to not burst into a coughing fit as he looked back at his husband with an incredulous look. Shoyuta, in his usual fashion, was staring at Midoriya as he would a stray cat. He could practically hear his husband, "It's a sad meow meow," excuse that he used to defend himself every time another stray cat was brought into their home. He shook his head with an empathetic, "No, Sho," whispered under his breath. Food scholarship paperwork. His husband was ever unrepentant. He shrugged. God damn it, Sho. Midoriya was paying attention to his tangle, aggressively attempting to get it to hold how he wanted. His face dipped into a pouty frown when he realized that it didn't bend that way and straightened the entire thing back out to start from the beginning. His tongue was ever so slightly poked out in this endeavor. Sad meow meow-dish, Shoyuta whispered and got smacked on the back for his troubles. Midoriya looked back. Huh. Nothing, kiddo. Hizashi chirped, sending a pleading look to his husband. Eraser was just thinking of his cat. All right? The kid tilted his head and Hizashi grimaced at the fact he could, in fact, see the resemblance to a sad kitten. Don't worry, Hizashi gave another thumbs up. Here we are at Nedzu's office. Mind heading in for a moment? I gotta talk to Eraser here. Midoriya looked a bit more nervous but steeled himself enough to nod and turn to head in. Once he was, Hizashi turned to his husband, giving an incredulous look. Haven't you been worrying about his home life anyway? Shoyuta asked incredulously. I mean, if we take him dash. Stray cats need to be approached slowly, Sho. Hizashi rubbed his face, absolutely done with his husband. You know this better than I do. We can't just outright go, Hey, I'm concerned you're ours now, Shuta's expression microscopically tightened. We're just talking about the food scholarship. The kid hasn't been able to eat since Monday and he thinks there might be a metabolic need dash. Monday? Shoyuta hissed suddenly. We've been busting double sessions since Monday. Not to mention that kid trains outside and you're telling me he's been training with no food dash. Hisashi interrupted him gently. Shoyuta stopped, going silent with fuming rage. That's why we're here. We're gonna get him on the hero's diet scholarship so he doesn't have to worry. He hasn't been able to afford food, and that's why he hasn't been eating, he carefully explained. The man took in a short breath, composing himself. We're gonna get him on the program so he can eat all he needs to. That's why you're here helping me, he murmured, rubbing a circle into his husband's freshly grabbed hand. Lunch rush isn't here still, he said quietly. We're doing this and we're taking him for dinner. I'll be demed if any of my kids go hungry at night. It's leftover night, Hisashi commented back before stopping. We have a lot of leftovers. Do you think Nem would be mad if she got uninvited? We can spin this as a whole, you'd be doing us a favor to eat all our food, kinda thing? I think we can, Shoyuta said, without even hesitating. I feed strays all the time. Nem knows this. She can deal with it. Why do people think you're so smart? Hisashi whined, plopping his head right onto Shuta's shoulders. You're a stupid FNG himbo. You're just emo and edgy. And people think you're this tough guy dash. Hisashi. But you feed kittens every day and take care of plants and cook like a housewife dash. Hisashi. And you sleep in Hello Kitty sweatpants dash. Hisashi. He startled and looked at his husband who was looking at him with an amused expression. The kid is waiting for us. You want to leave him with dad for that long? Sheet. Hisashi turned and quickly swung the door open. Unsurprisingly. Well, consider Midoriya, Nedzu chirped. Destroying the government would be more difficult without a revolution leader dash. But historically the leaders become the new dictators. Midoriya defended. A council would be more suitable and mostly people from minorities if we want to decrease the chance of another nationalist society. Oh hi sensei. This is your fault. Shoyuta looked at Hisashi who let out a long, suffering sigh. Nedzu, Hisashi put on a tense smile. We are here to talk about scholarship opportunities? Of course. Sit. He chirped in delight, carefully pushing the World Denomination Planning Board back behind its hidden corner. You were here concerning the hero's diet, correct? Why, yes, sir. Midoriya spoke quietly, hiding his head back in his chest. If it's possible. If not, I understand dash. It's available to any student who may need it. Nedzu corrected with a smile. So there are no worries, Midoriya. We just have some paperwork to fill out. Really? Indeed. Nedzu chirped, carefully digging into his desk. Here we are. The paperwork didn't take terribly long to all of their relief, but by the end, Midoriya was looking worse for wear. Hisashi was the one to speak as the last forms were filled out. Hey kiddo, you said you haven't been able to afford any food since Monday, right? Tired green eyes met his. Eraser and I have to clean out our fridge tonight. We do it every week to make sure nothing gets spoiled, But we usually have 2 other friends come to eat with us, but they're busy this week. If you have nothing, would you like to come eat dinner with us? It wasn't fully a lie. Tensei was busy and Nem could be convinced to stay at home. But wouldn't it be an inconvenience? The boy spoke softly. Hisashi offered a reassuring smile. Not at all, lil listener. We can even drop you off at home after. It'd be a huge help to us. We hate wasting food. At the prospect of being helpful, the boy perked up. Would that be all right with you? So long as I'm not an inconvenience, I'd be happy to. The boy perked up and Hisashi smiled back at him. Perfect. You want to take a moment to call ahead to anyone at home? The boy's smile strained the minusculest amount and he nodded. Go ahead and meet us out in the hallway then, we'll be out in a moment. Midoriya shuffled from the room, carefully removing his phone from his bag before gently shutting the door. The room was silent for a moment before. All right, you can say it, Shoyuta. He's a sad little meow meow. Shoyuta raised his hands to gesture vaguely at the door. He's like a stray cat. You did mention concerns, Netsu hummed. Likely should have thought ahead that Shoyuta may think Midoriya is a stray with how he acts. Dad, how can you think otherwise? Shoyuta gestures. That is a sad little kitten if I've ever seen one. And I've seen a lot of FNG cats. Netsu let out a short cackle at his son's antics. I'm not wrong. I never said you were, Shoyuta. Netsu spoke placatingly. I'll keep looking into things and I'll tell you what I can. Unfortunately, there's a few NDAs I cannot cross. The two men looked at each other and sighed. All right, Sensei. I got it, Dad. Good. Now, the creature smiled. I think you have a boy to feed, no? I'm sure he's exhausted. If you need an address later, I can get it for you. The two men stood, stretching from the sheer amount of paperwork. Thank you, Hisashi smiled without teeth. Really? Of course. It is no problem at all. Now run along. Their house was a bit of a trip away, meaning they drove to work. It was easy enough to get the kid loaded into the back seat, even while half asleep. There we are, Hisashi murmured, carefully getting the kid buckled in. He was blinking owlishly at his hands, fighting sleep like trying to fight a rushing river. We've got a bit of a ride. Yes, Sensei, came the tired reply. Shoyuta was in the passenger's seat and Hisashi in the front as he turned on the ignition. Hisashi pulled it into reverse to get from the parking spot while Shoyuta quickly turned down the volume of the radio and turned it to a quieter and gentler station. Within 3 minutes, Midoriya was asleep in their back seat. He really is exhausted, Shoyuta muttered. How didn't I see it? I probably wouldn't have seen it if he didn't accidentally rub off the concealer, Hisashi sighed. He's pretty good at hiding it. I think the whole week just took a toll on him. Shoyuta passed a glance back and watched as Midoriya startled awake, and stayed up for a few seconds before passing back out. Exhausted and unable to sleep. An unreasonably cruel punishment. No wonder he's exhausted. Hisashi hummed an agreement, carefully clicking the turn signal as he turned to another street. Oh, and Nem said she was fine with being uninvited, so long as we saved her the curry and brought it to her for lunch tomorrow. We'll save her a slice of cake too, Hisashi agreed. Arriving back to the place, Midoriya had woken up about 2 minutes before the trip ended. His stomach was growling loud enough that both adults felt it and winced in sympathy. Hunger was never something fun to deal with. Hisashi remembered being a child, barely eating enough himself. Trying to survive on 1 meal a day and… He shook off the thought, not willing to let himself spiral right now. There were more important things. Hey kiddo. Hisashi called back, half whispering. We've arrived. Midoriya met his eyes before moving to fiddle with the buckle, carefully getting himself undone. Hisashi got out of the car, followed by Shoyuta, and got the door for the boy, while Shoyuta grabbed his bag. He almost laughed at the disgruntled expression of his husband due to the sheer weight of the bag. Hisashi took the task of gently ushering the boy up the stairs till they arrived at their place, getting the door. Unsurprisingly to Hisashi, the cats ran for them. However, at that moment he'd forgotten to inform the poor child between them of his impending fate. A victim of chance. I am so sorry, Midoriya. He got a confused and half-delirious expression in reply before the boy was, rudely, tackled by 4 insane cats. Hisashi very much didn't laugh, trying as hard as he could to hold it back. Shoyuta was not so kind, wheezing with one hand against the wall as the boy had been laid out on the floor by 4 very determined cats. Luckily enough for them, after the initial shock, Midoriya didn't seem terribly upset about the situation, moving to pet the cats that were meowing and yelling at him in tandem. Hello, Midoriya said softly to the cats. It's nice to meet you. They're menaces. You'll wish you hadn't, Shoyuta countered, grabbing 2 of them. Sardine toffee. Come on. Grab the other 2 and bring them in. Midoriya didn't hesitate, carefully grabbing the other 2 cats with a small smile despite his obvious exhaustion. You've got yesterday and Martha. Hisashi smiled fondly at his husband and the kid who headed in. If Midoriya wasn't so tired, Hisashi would have bet he'd be a bundle of nerves. He huffed, walking in behind the 2 and locking the door behind them. Hisashi watched Shoyuta shuffle the kid to the couch and get him to sit down and begin to talk with him about the cats as he headed to the kitchen to start warming up the food. Shoyuta was definitely doing a good job keeping the kid awake until he could eat again. Within 10-ish minutes, the food was all warm and laid out across the table. Meals and leftovers from the last week or so, breakfast, lunch, and dinners, all laid out. With a plate for each of them, Hisashi passed a glance to Midoriya, whose mouth was almost watering. "Go ahead and dig in, kiddo," Hisashi chirped. Midoriya's eyes moved up to Mike, seeming to scan him for a moment before sheepishly getting a little bit of food and waiting. Shoyuta and Hisashi quickly filled their plates and bowls, Shoyuta with the soup from a few days ago, along with the salad from yesterday, and Hisashi with the onigiri from lunch and some fried fish from a few nights back. The meal was surrounded by Hisashi and Shuta's quiet conversation, though they attempted to start a conversation with Midoriya a few times. His exhaustion was still rather prominent, so they allowed him to just bask in their conversation with the occasional cat hopping up onto his lap periodically. When the two finished their plates, they grimaced when they realized how much hadn't been eaten still. Midoriya had only made it halfway through his first plate, and Hisashi grimaced when he realized what was happening. Pushing around the food, hoping you could trick your brain into thinking you were eating more. Hisashi barely managed to push 100 pounds. Always so hungry. He shook it off before gently tapping the table. "Kiddo," Hisashi said softly, getting the boy's attention. "You can have as much as you'd like, I promise. Anything that isn't eaten today will just be tossed." The boy ducked his head a bit. "It'll just get thrown away? But aren't you two still hungry?" "Nope," Shoyuta said with no hesitation. "I'm full. I'm not one to wait on food. If I was hungry, I'd still be eating." "Same here, listener," Hisashi smiled, trying to assure the boy. Midoriya's eyes met his for a moment. In those green eyes, he was grateful to see an emotion pooling through. Relief and gratitude. "Eat until you're full, all right, kiddo? We offered to feed you, we're gonna feed you," he joked. "Ever heard of Hansel and Gretel?" Midoriya actually smiled back at that, giggling a bit. "It was a very sweet noise," Hisashi noted. "Gonna fatten me up and cook me?" Midoriya snorted and Hisashi smiled back. Of course, the kid knew the brother's grim. "Absolutely. But maybe instead of cooking you, Shoyuta here will just train you to the bone," he snorted, bumping shoulders with his husband, who rolled his eyes in response. "Just eat up, kiddo." That open invitation seemed to finally be the thing to get the boy comfortable, and he grabbed his chopstick and began to eat. 7 plates in, both adults tried to hide their astoundment at the kid. He could pack down food like it was going out of style. They were almost out of leftovers, to their mutual relief. The kid was finally slowing his roll, his exhaustion catching up to him as he took his last bite of curry. "I think I'm full," he murmured, rubbing his eyes. "I haven't eaten that well in ever." The adults shared a look before Hisashi gave his best hero smile. "Well, kiddo, I'm glad we don't have to throw so much away. You really helped us out here." The kid gave an exhausted smile as he reached up to rub his eyes. Hey, problem child," Shoyuta cut in, making said kid look his way. Hisashi raised an eyebrow in his husband's direction. "It's already pretty late. Why don't we just get you a bed made on the couch and we'll drop you off in the morning?" Hisashi quickly turned, prepared to berate the hell out of his husband for pushing things way too far too fast when Midoriya yawned. "Would that be okay?" Hisashi paused. "Oh, this was okay. I wouldn't offer if not. That'd be illogical," he responded with zero hesitation. Midoriya chuckled quietly at that. "That makes sense," he murmured, rubbing his eyes. Shoyuta stood, grabbing all the dishes and bringing them to the sink. "I'll make the bed, Zashi. You see if you can wrangle him into something from the spare closet?" He spoke, and Hisashi took a moment to realize how impressive this was. No wonder Shoyuta brought home so many strays. He was good. "Of course, he chirped back. "Come on, listener. The school uniform isn't too bad, but it doesn't beat a loose t-shirt and some sweatpants." Midoriya, too exhausted to even think, just stood and followed him silently, occasionally yawning and rubbing his face. They arrived at the guest closet where most of their group just kept spare clothes. With a quick glance, he pulled a "put your hands up" t-shirt and a random pair of shorts he bet were Tensei's. "Here you go," he carefully set them in the boy's hands. "Bathroom's over there. Feel free to wash up too." It was a testament to the kid's determination as he gave a small smile and headed off to clean up instead of falling asleep on his feet. Through the night, he'd rubbed his eyes enough to get off all the concealer and the adults could see the purple bruises under his eyes. Once he was definitely in the bathroom, Hisashi headed back out to the living room to see the couch had been transformed into its pull-out bed equivalent and had sheets and such. "How did you do that?" The full question didn't even need to be asked. "I'm good at wrangling strays," Shoyuta shrugged. He went from feeling so bad about eating to eating 7 plates of food and agreeing to sleep over. "Shoyuta, I'm starting to think you're magic." Shoyuta looked up with the most deadpan expression he'd seen in a moment and responded, "Twinkle twinkle beach, I'm a FANG fairy." Hisashi sighed. "I'm not gonna ask. Good job. I'm tired." "Agreed." Within a few minutes, the kid was coming out dressed in clothes that weren't his, face fully washed off. Hisashi and Shoyuta tried not to keep their eyes on the scars matting him, his face and neck and arms, who would hurt such a sweet kid, and Shoyuta got him onto the bed. "If you need anything, we're just a few rooms away," Shoyuta assured. He only got a grumble in response as all 4 cats wrangled their way and cuddled around the boy. The kid was out like a light. Hisashi sighed fondly, leaning over and leaning his head on Shuta's shoulder. "The cats like him," Hisashi smiled. "That spare bedroom might not be so spare at this rate," Shoyuta replied, leaning over and kissing Hisashi gently. Hisashi huffed, wrapping an arm around their husband's waist and began leading him back to the bedroom after checking that the door was locked. "Maybe not," Hisashi conceded. The morning was slow for the 2 teachers and the student. Midoriya slept easily through the early morning, highlighting just how exhausted he was. The cats seemed perfectly content with keeping him as a pillow as long as they could, however. Their morning was quiet, Hisashi and Shoyuta keeping their volume down so as to not wake the kid on their couch. Of course, it had been rudely interrupted by the kid's aggressive text tones. Shoyuta was careful to get over to mute it, only peeking at them. "Trainer, Midoriya, you're running late." "Trainer, how can someone be this incompetent?" "Trainer, I am very disappointed in you." "Trainer, Deku." "Trainer, consider our meeting today cancelled. Maybe it'll make you think twice about skipping our training sessions." "Kami," Hisashi muttered, reading them over his shoulders. "What a hard ass. What an a-hole," Shoyuta growled softly. "What the hell is wrong with him? He's a kid, he might need a break." Hisashi read them over once more, briefly passing at the use of the kid's hero name as an obvious insult. It sounded like the way Bakugo used it. Both scowled. Hisashi took the time to mute the messages, carefully silencing the kid's phone before placing it back next to him. "I'm sure we can talk about this with him later," Hisashi assured, more for himself than Shoyuta. "But I'm sure he's tired of us being in his business today." "Yeah." Barely an hour later, the boy was slowly waking up. Shoyuta was in the kitchen starting breakfast when the cats began to yowl at being jostled. "Morning, listener," Hisashi called out, loud enough to be heard but not loud enough to startle. A peek around the couch revealed the kid's mess of bedhead as he rubbed the sleep away from his eyes, yawning like a kitten. The cats seemed enamored. "How are you feeling, kiddo?" Hisashi asked softly, and Midoriya gave another quiet yawn before blinking owlishly at him. "You awake?" he murmured, scratching his neck with stiff hands. Hisashi couldn't help the quiet coo and chuckle. "I see that. Are you feeling up to some breakfast?" Some gentle coaxing got the boy to the table, where Shoyuta was putting down a classic American breakfast. One of Hisashi's favorites. "I knew I married you for more than the tax benefits," Hisashi cooed at Shoyuta, who just rolled his eyes. "I can't think of a single other reason," Shoyuta deadpanned back. "Tax benefits are very attractive." "Aha," Hisashi rolled his eyes right back. Midoriya, to his credit, was still tired enough that he didn't even seem fazed as he just munched on the hash browns. His lingering sleepiness kept him quiet as he just quietly ate. Hisashi and Shoyuta kept up their quiet squabble through breakfast, allowing the domestic feeling to wash over them. It felt right. The two, with a kid they care for between them, a safe morning. Midoriya, Shoyuta called quietly and Midoriya raised his eyes. You feeling better, kiddo? Sho asked if you were feeling any better, Hisashi repeated, with a soft smile. A few moments of quiet before the boy nodded. Midoriya's hair was dipping into his food and Hisashi reached over to carefully brush it out, and in return got the kid pushing into his hand like a cat asking for attention. Hisashi stared, before murmuring. A sad meow meow. Aizawa's sadistic grin grew. It took a while to get through breakfast, but eventually, the kid was awake enough. A short talk later Hisashi was loading him into the car to get him back home. Midoriya now held his bag, sitting in the front seat. All right kiddo, Hisashi chirped, looking over. Can you tell me your address so we can get you home? 140 Southwest Street, the apartment building on the corner, Midoriya replied with a sheepish smile. Thank you sensei. Hisashi paused, racking his brain before snorting. All right, let's get there kiddo. It wasn't even a 3-minute car ride. Midoriya, to his credit, seemed a little embarrassed at not even realizing he was so close to home. The boy was a rather impressive approximation of a strawberry. Sensei, I'm so sorry if I realized I was so close to home dash. It's all right kiddo. Hisashi cut him off carefully. We enjoyed your company. Hisashi took one of the guest parking spots, smiling softly over at the kid. I'm so sorry for burdening you dash. Hisashi reached over and gently flicked the kid's forehead, startling him from his ramble. Wide green eyes looked at him. Not a burden. Hisashi waved a pointed finger at him in an exaggerated motion. We invited you over. I promise, neither Sho nor I were bothered by you spending the night. Midoriya looked stunned, wide green eyes watering ever so slightly as he reached up and rubbed the tears from his eyes. Thank you sensei. Just Yamada if I'm not in school, ya hear? He winked at the boy. Or Hisashi, since we're practically neighbors. Right. Yamada-san. Hisashi chuckled softly. Close enough. The two sat in an awkward silence before an idea came to Hisashi's mind. You mind if I come up and get a glass of water real fast? I have some painkillers in my bag and I think I might need a bit of Advil. I didn't realize how strong the sun was today. Oh. Izuku perked up at the idea of being helpful. Of course, I mean Yamada-san. The car was turned off and the doors were unlocked. It was a short walk up the stairs, Midoriya's little rambles accompanying them. Hisashi took in kind, responding where he could with little interjections. With Midoriya's brain moving faster than his mouth, he was able to get Midoriya to switch to English with little interjections of the language. Midoriya didn't even catch on to revealing his status as fluent in the language, seeming far too enthused with having someone to discuss his latest quirk theory with. Finally, they arrived at the door, and Hisashi didn't like the anxiety that replaced the cheer in his gut. Midoriya took his key from his Hawk's lanyard that was around his neck and carefully unlocked the door. The house inside was quiet. The lights were flicked on in an instant and Mike stared. The house was depressingly bare. There was a beige couch and a small coffee table, but no TV. No pictures on the wall. No comforting blankets or pillows. Like some home displays. Hisashi couldn't help the lead that settled in his stomach. It reminded him far too much of a group home. Something to keep others placated for the abuse inside the walls. Where's the love? Why don't they care? Why do they hate? You said you needed a glass of water, sensei? Midoriya spoke softly. For the Advil? Oh, yeah, thanks, lil listener. Forgot for a moment. He winked at the boy who eyed him in slight amusement. I'll be right back, Midoriya nodded. Glasses are on the first shelf. Quickly the kid disappeared into the nearby bathroom and Mike took a breath. He only had 3-ish minutes to look around. He moved for the door first, eyeing the bedrooms. One was locked with a "Do Not Disturb" sign and the other had a childish plate with the word Izuku written across it. He was quiet as he twisted the handle and looked in. His heart dropped a bit. The kid didn't have a bed frame. Just a mattress on the corner floor and it looked kind of old. He had a desk but it was definitely a fixer-upper. A bookshelf with no hero merch, like he would have assumed. Only a few books and a lot more notebooks. This looked far too much like a neglect case for his liking. He quickly shut the door and headed to the kitchen, and looked into the pantry and fridge. The pantry was completely empty, save for an empty box of cereal and some flour and salt. Same for the fridge, but there were also a few stalks of rotten celery. It made something deep in Hisashi ache. An old rotten wound. I'm hungry, please, I just need some food, I promise I'll be good dash. He quickly got his water and choked down his pills in time for Midoriya to open the bathroom door and smile at him. Thank you so much Yamada-san, for the food and allowing me to stay the night. The boy bowed his head and he was genuinely so grateful that Hisashi wanted to cry. It's no problem kiddo, he assured. If you ever need anything, and I mean anything, you can come over. We live barely a block away after all. The boy met his eyes in wonder. And kiddo? If you're hungry, you can come to visit us, all right? Rather you be fed, ya dig? Midoriya's eyes began to water at that, and he sniffled. Thank you, Yamada-san. That means a lot. The offer had been left open, and the first time Midoriya came over to eat, the two were overjoyed. He'd asked around 6 p.m. if he could come by to eat, and they had been delighted to let him in. Of course, this meant doubling the amount of food they made, but neither minded much. Because goddammit, the kid sat with them and ate. It had been a Saturday and the kid was actually talking. Yeah, I spent most of the day training, he confessed with a sheepish smile, eating the spaghetti that had been presented to him. And I thought I had money left over for some extra food? But, apparently, there had been an overdue electricity bill and that priority was a little higher than food. Hisashi nodded, smiling softly to the kid. Then we're glad you came over. Training is hard work and without the proper diet, it's pretty useless, huh? Midoriya nodded emphatically. I was thinking about it, Midoriya says a bit quieter, the gleam in his eyes warning of an oncoming ramble. Logically, since the quirk is a stockpile, it both requires a strong force of energy and a strong hold, right? Hisashi nods, taking a bite of his own food. For the quirk to even be usable to me, I needed enough strength that it wouldn't just, kill me right out of the gate dash. Shoyuta choked at that. So I built strength. That's a single outlet for it. But when my diet was worse dash, Hisashi grimaced. My bones broke more often. As I eat and find ways to release the excess energy, it gets safer to use since it's fully absorbed into my body. Working off the extra energy only works so much, and then I realized one of the most effective ways to safely use it is by eating. It was a bit of a strange thing to realize because most quirks rely on the energy within the body, but since it stockpiles energy without release, I need the opposite. And when I eat, a lot of the energy goes towards my stomach and works with my body. Similar to how when I learned full cowling I learned to spread it across my entirely. Having an extra outlet within me helps with managing the power and keeping it growing at a normal rate. It seems to produce faster when I'm hungry or tired, which is dangerous. Oh. Hisashi perked up. I get it. Like an overcharged battery. Giving the energy tasks keep it from overflowing. Exactly. Midoriya seemed delighted. And with the hero's diet, it's been getting a lot better. I think I might try to learn yoga or meditation to help with quirk release. That's a good idea, problem child, Shoyuta nodded, sipping his coffee. Hisashi used to meditate a lot since he had a similar issue. That's right. Hisashi offered a thumbs up. When I was younger, I didn't use my quirk often dash. God, it won't shut up dash. Muzzle it. Hisashi shook himself from his pause, catching his husband's concerned gaze before continuing. Sorry, zoned out there. I didn't use it often since I wasn't able to, and it resulted in a lot of mishaps. Once I meditated, however, I learned I could buzz and hum out the extra energy at a silent frequency that was safe. That way I have fewer voice accidents, yeah? Exactly. Midoriya lit up, seemingly delighted at having someone understand. Releasing it makes it so much easier to manage in combat situations too. I'd love to teach you a bit about meditation if you'd like, lil listener. Hisashi chirped, equally delighted. Shoyuta nodded in approval. I'd be happy to show you some yoga techniques if it keeps your bones from breaking. The boy flushed a bit red at that, ducking his head. Yeah, I'd really appreciate that if you'd be willing, Aizawa-san. Yamada-san. Dinner was finished quietly and Midoriya was quick to offer to clean up for intruding on their night. Shoyuta had been reluctant, but Hizashi allowed the kid and nodded. If you want to get that started, I'll go dig out the yoga mats. Show here can teach you some moves. A bit later, I'll write you some helpful tips on meditation to look over, you dig? The two ended up in the spare office, digging through old stuff till they found the two mats. Shoyuta rarely actually used the mats, rather just doing it on the floor for convenience. Hizashi was humming a soft tune as they searched while Shoyuta looked thoughtful. Hey Hizashi? Shoyuta asked, a bit softer than usual. You let the kid do the dishes? Hizashi raised his head to meet his husband's eyes. The question left unsaid was obvious enough. Midoriya is a kid who hates being in debt to others. I understand that. Allowing him to do the dishes can help him feel like his debt is paid off. I was the same way, remember? I'll buy you lunch, Hizashi. I promise it's fine. The words had nearly sent a teenage Hizashi into a panic attack. But I can't owe you. I don't have anything. You don't owe me anything, Hizashi. Not for this. Please, I can't. Shoyuta grimaced at the reminder, turning back. I don't really like thinking about that, Shoyuta confessed softly. You really hated kindness shown to you, even if you showed it to everyone else. Kindness meant someone could take advantage of me, Hizashi responded. And while I hate the fact the kid might think that way, it's a learned response and takes just as long to unteach. Best play to his comforts while we're earning his trust. Shoyuta hummed non-committally before grabbing one of the mats. I found the mat, Hizashi. I found the other, he smiled, grabbing the vinyl mat. The two met back in the center of the room, and just as Hizashi was turning to leave, Shoyuta gently grabbed his waist and pulled him into a hug. Shoyuta? Zashi, Shoyuta spoke softly. Take care of yourself. I can see that Midoriya's situation is weighing on you. Hizashi felt himself deflate a bit at being so obvious, even if he knew there was almost nothing he could hide from his husband. He laid back, resting the back of his head on Shuta's shoulder. I don't like seeing kids in situations like mine, he murmured, closing his eyes. Shoyuta got them both to a sitting position on the floor so Hizashi could lay back in his lap. They could hear the kid in the other room humming a little tune from the kitchen as the sink still ran. We're helping where we can, Zashi, Shoyuta affirmed softly, running a hand through the blonde's silky hair. We gotta build the trust, and we can hope he comes to us. But what if he Hizashi's breath began to speed up a bit. A bottle of pills in his hand. Zashi, it's gonna be okay. Please give them to me. It's gonna be okay. You're not alone. I promise. I don't want him to make the same mistakes I did, he spoke softer. He's a kid, Shoyuta. He shouldn't be alone like this. I know, Zashi, Shoyuta murmured, gently moving and grabbing one of Hizashi's hands and placing a gentle kiss between the knuckles. But we can help him from here, can't we? I'll need to thank your dad for my acting skills, he laughed wetly. I don't think Midoriya realizes just yet how worried we are. Shoyuta nodded, moving Hizashi's hand so the back of the man's hand was pressed against his face. I think we're playing our role well. Shoyuta placed another kiss on Hizashi's hand before letting it go. We build trust, the kid comes to us when he needs help, right? And if we find any evidence, well, we take him and keep him safe. You're right, Shoyuta, Hizashi sighed, moving and sitting up. You're right. When am I not? Shoyuta pet an eyebrow which got a snort from the blonde. He leaned forward, gently placing one more kiss on Hizashi's forehead. It'll be all right, Hizashi. Right now, we gotta show the brat some yoga, don't we? Yeah, we've kept him waiting, Hizashi chuckled, standing and giving a hand for Shoyuta to take. Let's go. Right. All right, problem child, get that leg up, Kami dash. I didn't mention I was double-jointed, did I? A little warning would be appreciated dash. Hizashi laughed. This was all right. It would all be okay. The night went on. CW, graphic abuse. Ends after the italics. A muzzle locked on his face. He was panting, unable to breathe. Bile was clogging his throat as he stared up at his dad. He must have looked pathetic, begging like he was. But one kick to the gut had the few crackers he'd stolen to eat right back in his mouth and dripping from the muzzle. Demon brat. A sharp kick to the arm sends him back into the wall. Wide, frantic eyes staring. He missed his mom. She would at least keep him distracted when she wasn't drunk. But she was gone again, leaving him to fend for himself in the house. Another swing that Hizashi barely managed to keep from hitting him. You steal my food, you fat pig? You think you deserve my food for what you did to us? It had been an accident. He was a baby, how was he meant to not cry? He couldn't even think back to slam. Hizashi cried out as the back of his head smacked into the wall and the vomit dripped from his mouth. You'd be lucky if I didn't sell you off for how much you've wasted me. You leech. You worthless little dash. Hizashi. You might as well go die, you little urchin. Hizashi. You deserve nothing dash. Hizashi. Hizashi sat up fast, panting and gripping at his hair, desperate to control his breathing. Too fast, he was back in that house. He wasn't safe, wasn't? I need dash. He needed to run. Where was he? Where was he left? 3 dash. Where was he? There you go. For dash. Finally, he met concerned and tired charcoal eyes and could finally see what was in front of him. He blinked. There you are, Shoyuta murmured. You had a nightmare, Hizashi. It's all right. Can you tell me 4 things you can see? Dash. He grimaced at his stutter. God, was he panicking? It was hard to breathe. I'm fine dash. 4 things, Shoyuta gently pressed. His eyes scanned the room. Teet toffee. 1 more. The wind window. 3 things you can hear, Shoyuta continued. Hizashi grimaced. Shoyuta gave a knowing look. Like Martha's claw. He took a deep breath. Am I tinnitus? 2 you can smell? Coffee and laundry detergent. And 1 thing you can taste. Bile? Shoyuta nodded, reaching up, and ever so gently placing his hand on the side of Hizashi's. He winced but leaned into it with a weaker breath. Do you need to throw up? Shoyuta asked gently. Hizashi considered it, before shaking his head. I'm okay now, Hizashi sighed. Sorry, dash. Don't apologize, Shoyuta cut him off. You've helped me the same way, Hizashi. Shoyuta was gentle, pulling him into a hug. What happened? Hizashi hesitated at the question, before leaning in. I was back there. Shoyuta hummed. That man, he was there. But was a kid again. No one would help dash. Deep breaths, Shoyuta reminded. Hizashi paused to take a breath. I feel like there is something worse about Midoriya's situation, he confessed weakly. I feel the idea of it makes me sick even if just looks like a classic neglect case dash. You think there's more, Shoyuta spoke. It wasn't really a question. I don't know, he confessed. But the situation's been sending back worse than usual as of late. Like my brain telling me to help dash. We are helping Hizashi, Shoyuta whispered. And we're gonna help more. Once he comes to us or we need to step in. We need to give him time, Hizashi. What if he doesn't realize it? That things can be okay, Sho? I don't dash. Hizashi, Shoyuta gently pressed a hand to his back. Give me a deep breath. You're panicking again. Hizashi obliged, taking in another longer and slower breath before speaking. We're already stepping in. If he's in a bad spot, we're here to help. He trusts us enough to come over and eat with us, doesn't he? That's true. Then we're making progress, Shoyuta murmured, moving back to place a kiss on Hizashi's forehead before he moved to lay them back down. We're helping the problem child, Hizashi. We're just working at his pace, okay? All right, Sho, he murmured, moving to hide his face in his husband's chest. All right. Midoriya didn't make the habit of coming down every week, but every once in a while he asked for food. It was endearing that he was beginning to trust them when they said he wasn't a bother. The kid was beyond sweet, even offering to help cook for food. Both adults made the point that it wasn't conditional that he cook or clean for food, but that his help was appreciated nonetheless. It was one of these weekends when a knock on the door startled them. Shoyuta looked over to Hisashi, who shrugged. No text from the kid? None, Hisashi confirmed. He swung his legs over the couch, quickly getting to a sitting position before standing up. He arrived at the door and opened it. Midoriya stood there, sheepish. Midoriya, Hisashi greeted, softly smiling at the boy. Come on in. What can we do, F? He trailed off when he saw the thick and deep purple bruise on the boy's neck. Like someone had tried to strangle him. Hisashi's panic took over as he bent down, carefully brushing his fingers over it. Kiddo, what happened? The boy tried to talk, opening his mouth and grimacing when nothing came out. His throat was far too bruised for words to even escape. Hisashi didn't wait to usher the boy in, meeting his husband's eyes. Get the first aid kit. Midoriya's little frantic hand waves were ignored in favor of Hisashi getting him to the couch and sitting him down. Midoriya, can you still breathe all right? Are you okay? Hisashi, Shuda's gentle calming voice snapped him out of his spiraling panic attack. He knew he had tears in his eyes. I've got the kit. Can you go check the bathroom for anything else? Hisashi met his husband's eyes, catching the mouthed words. Go take a breather. I got this. He looked back at Midoriya, who looked just as concerned for him as he did for Midoriya. He took in a deep breath before nodding, slowly removing himself before heading to the bathroom. He trusted his husband. He needed to panic in peace. Shoyuta watched Hisashi's back until the bathroom door was closed and locked. Midoriya raised shaky hands. Is Yamada going to be okay? The boy signed. Shoyuta huffed, reaching over and gently ruffling the kid's hair. He'll be fine, kiddo, he assured. We're gonna get you some ice for your throat and some Advil to get the bruising down. Does that sound all right? The boy nodded sheepishly, grimacing at the feeling of the bruise. Can you tell me what happened? Midoriya hesitated, before slowly raising his hands and beginning to sign as Aizawa gathered an ice pack. I was training, sure. And I was cleaning the dump. Because I find it easy strength training and one of the pieces of trash came loose and, thunk. Midoriya described eloquently. And I got home and I realized I didn't have any antiseptic. Antiseptic? Shoyuta raised an eyebrow. The kid then pulled up his hoodie to show a sharp and long jagged cut up his forearm that was gauzed over. Kid maybe start with that dash. He practically dragged the kid over to the sink, grabbing the antiseptic and wincing as he began to clean it. There was no debris. Did you already clean this? The boy nodded. So, correct me if I'm wrong. You just came over for antiseptic for the cut. He nodded again. Kid, this needs stitches. Midoriya moved his hands to sign again. I can do them myself. But I ran out of antiseptic and can't afford any right now. I was hoping to use some of yours and pay you back next week. Kemi this kid. Midoriya, Shoyuta spoke sternly. The boy winced. You're gonna stay here, and you're gonna let me treat this. I don't want you treating your own injuries, not like these ones. Am I understood? The boy didn't respond, merely hiding behind his bangs. Within 5 minutes, they were back on the couch and Shoyuta was gently stitching his arm closed. The boy didn't even flinch, to his credit. A small dose of painkillers and the news worked wonders on the boy. He wasn't even fidgeting like he normally would, entirely enamored with the news. Shoyuta partly wondered if it was the news or the drags. A batch of stitches later, Shoyuta gently wrapped the boy's arm in clean bandages. It had been cleaned and disinfected, but now it needed to heal. As he was putting away the kit, he couldn't help but notice the boy's old scars littering up his arms. Not to mention the fresh bruises. Hey kid, he muttered. It was a few moments before Midoriya's attention was on him. You can come by if you need anything. Thank you for coming to us for this. I doubt it was easy. Midoriya blinked, looking surprised but slowly nodded. And if you ever need someone to listen, kid, we will. All right. Midoriya looked confused by the sentiment but nodded once again before his gaze moved to his arm and he slowly flexed his hand. All right. I don't want you to overexert yourself, understood? If I see this reopening because you were training, we will be having words, he warned, genuinely. The boy quickly nodded, giving a sheepish smile. All right. A quick hair ruffle and Shoyuta got up. Feel free to nap off that painkiller while you're here. We'll get you back home once you wake up. Shoyuta took the time the kid lay on the couch to head to the bathroom, knocking twice before going for the handle. I'm coming in, Zashi. He waited for a response, and when he didn't receive one, he silently opened the door and peeked in. Hizashi was sat on the floor, head tucked between his legs, eyes closed but breathing evenly. Shoyuta smiled softly, carefully shutting the door before placing himself on the floor by his husband. The kid's fine. He had actually come over for antiseptic since he'd gotten a nasty gash from training, Shoyuta told him, keeping his voice even. Hizashi's eyes raised to meet his. I told him to take a nap on our couch and we'll take him home later after another dose of Advil. He's fine. Hizashi signed with shaky hands. Shoyuta nodded, leaning over and placing a small kiss on his husband's forehead. A bit of tension bled from his shoulders and Hizashi sighed, giving a weak smile. Thank you. Sorry. No reason to be, Shoyuta murmured. The kid is fine. You taking a step back was the best thing for you at the time. I should have been helping, not panicking. Hizashi, Shoyuta spoke evenly. You can't help but panic. Hell, I was panicking when I saw the bruise. But he said he'd gotten hit by some rubble when cleaning. He's okay, Zash. You're okay too, all right? Hizashi shakily huffed at his husband fondly. I should have done more. Hizashi, you removed yourself from a situation which would make things bad for you and for him. That is a lot, Shoyuta murmured. Hizashi leaned his head onto Shuta's shoulder. I'm sure the kid would 100% forgive you for a corn chip. That got a snort. Shoyuta smiled, humming and gently placing himself around Hizashi. Don't forget, Hizashi. You're okay. And right now he is too. He allowed another deep breath before he moved, shakily getting himself to his feet. Shoyuta nodded fondly, copying the action. Why don't we go make some soup for us and the kid? Since he's napping here, we might as well feed him dinner too. Tomato bisque? Hizashi offered. That sounds like a plan to me. Hizashi, after briefly cleaning up, quickly headed from the bathroom, made a beeline to the living room, and allowed himself a breath of relief. Midoriya was sprawled across their couch, an ice pack around his neck and his arm in clean white bandages. He looked relaxed with the light blanket draped over him and the cats swarming him. A bit of drool was gathered in the corner of the kid's mouth as he snored softly. He was safe. He let his shoulders drop, watching for a moment before turning and heading for the kitchen. Tomato bisque? Hizashi asked Shoyuta softly, who already had his apron on. Only if you help, he retorted. It didn't take a terribly long time to get the soup done, with some biscuits on the side. The cooking was relaxing to Hizashi, even if he wasn't as good at it as his husband. Occasionally he would peek back in the living room, just to check that yes, Midoriya was still safe. Midoriya was still okay. Once dinner came, Hizashi took it upon himself to gently wake the boy and get him to the kitchen table. He wasn't terribly asleep, but the pain medication still had him a bit loopy. Thank you for the food, the boy murmured, lifting his spoon. His voice was a bit hoarse from his bruised throat, but it wasn't bad enough that he couldn't talk. Hizashi smiled fondly as their key student. Their student? As if sensing his thoughts, Shoyuta looked over and grinned a sadistic smile that sent a chill down Hizashi's spine. What are? Hizashi trailed off. Shoyuta just bent forward, leaning casually on one hand. Hey Midoriya. The boy looked up, blinking at him. Whatcha think of the cats? The boy paused, letting his tired brain catch up with the question before giving a tired smile. Little meow meows. Good little meow meows. Hizashi looked slowly at the boy, who moved a hand and rubbed his eyes in a way that looked so much like a cat it was terrible. Hizashi slowly looked at Shoyuta again, who looked incredibly vindicated. He is, Shoyuta mouthed, not just a sad meow meow. He is the sad meow meow. Shoulda. Hizashi whined, slamming his face on the table. Midoriya's eyes moved to him. Kiddo. Because you are a human child. Sad meow meow. Shoyuta whispered under his breath. Don't let Shoyuta infect you. I'm begging. Continue being a human child. Midoriya blinked owlishly at him, still drugged, tired, and a bit confused. I'm the sad meow meow, he murmured, confused. Hisashi's emphatic headshake was in time with Shuta's aggressive nods. Oh, I'm confused. Maybe not the best time to confuse him, Zashi, Shoyuta snorted, nudging his husband. I'm sure the sad meow meow is very much confused. He is a child. Hisashi whisper yelled, desperate. He is not a dash. Kitten, this. Midoriya interrupted them. They both looked back to see all 4 cats gathering on the boy, who now looked incredibly content. The cats looked just as happy. Shoyuta. You've infected him. Shoyuta cackled in delight. Meow meows, Midoriya murmured, placing his head into Sardine's fur. Hisashi couldn't help but feel like this was right. This was how things were meant to be. Even if Shoyuta was correct about the kid being a sad meow meow, the kid was starting to go to them in school too. Sometimes he'd quietly ask if he could eat with them, joined by some of his quieter friends. Hisashi never shut him down, and often now, Midoriya and Todoroki could be found eating together in the quiet room with him. Since Shoyuta just napped through the lunch party, he found that neither of them minded. It felt right. Hisashi couldn't help but huff. They were in deep for this kid already. But with his gaze a bit sharper, Hisashi began to see the small bruises on the wrist, the occasional minor shiner, all easily hidden but there. He forced his panic down, mentally affirming himself. The kid was okay. He would be okay. He was scared to see if there were more bruises. It had been a little after 9 p.m. when there was a knock on the door. For a Friday, this was highly unusual. Most of everyone knew not to bother them on Fridays because it was the end of the week and the 2 adults were grumpy to say the least. Plus, Midoriya always warned them if he was coming after 8 p.m. Shoyuta and Hisashi exchanged expressions before their hands were up. Best 2 of 3? Loser takes the door, Shoyuta nodded. 7 rounds later, Hisashi stood and headed for the door and opened it. He dash. His voice caught in his throat when he looked down. There, with a bushel of green hair that looked more black with whatever injury the kid must have had, stood Midoriya Izuku in all his bloody glory. Owlish eyes blinked back at him, different-sized pupils, a concussion, not a good sign, and looked back down at his phone in betrayal. Alexa, I told you to take me, a slurred voice murmured. Hisashi was stunned into a statue as Alexa spoke. Arrived at Yamazawa home. He blinked down at his phone, looking very unimpressed yet very exhausted. I'll remember this is the next time I charge you. Eyes looked back up at him. I'm sorry. Yama, Hisashi was finally shocked from his stupor. I'll get going dash. Whoa there listener dash, Hisashi carefully stopped him. The boy looked 2 seconds away from collapsing and he was feverish as all hell. Come on in. I don't want you walking home in that state, ya hear? Green eyes blinked at him in confusion. Why not? You've got a concussion at least, he started. Your words are slurring and you look like you're gonna collapse, lil listener. I'm not sending you home like this. Not alone. There were a few moments before the boy smiled. Oh, hi Yamasan, when did you get there? Oh if dash. He didn't even wait before ushering the boy in the door and closing it behind him. Call your mom. He spoke in a whispered yell, taking note of the boy's wincing. Like, yesterday. Shoyuta snagged a glance before going wide-eyed at the boy. Oh, that was not a good sign. Shoyuta was now also panicking. He nodded before quickly turning to the kitchen. Hisashi was gentle in leading the stumbling boy to the bathroom and got him to sit down. The kid was a goddamn mess, from the bruises and blood on his head to the scrapes on his arms. All right, kiddo, Hisashi spoke. We gotta get you fixed up. You're not looking great. My head hurts, the boy whimpered slightly and Hisashi gave a sympathetic smile. I bet it does. We're gonna wash your head with some soap and water to get the grime off first, then we're gonna wrap it, all right? You've got a bit of a nasty concussion, so stay awake for me, you dig? The boy seemed to be genuinely considering all the options, as if he had more than one, and nodded, wincing at the action. We're gonna get your hoodie off before we wash up, you dig? It'll be easier now than later. The boy nodded again, this time a bit easier, and Hisashi let out a sigh of relief. With a bit of wrangling and a bit of a struggle, he managed to wrangle the kid's hoodie over his head and barely managed to restrain his hiss at the result. Scars. So many scars. New gauges too, if the bleeding mark of unevolved was any indication. Later, he promised himself. He forced himself to stay in the present, refusing to let himself fall into his own memories when his kid needed help. He got the kid carefully laid over the bathtub and began to gently rub the blood and grime from the kid's hair. It was quickly identifiable where the worst of the injury was, right on the back of his head. Soon enough, it was carefully cleaned and Hisashi already had the gauze out, working on wrapping it. Of course, this seemed to bring a whole new problem. The kid was goddamn exhausted. Listener, Hisashi spoke, gently shaking the kid back awake. Can you talk to me? You're not supposed to be falling asleep right now. Came the eloquent reply. I know it's hard, he grimaced but offered as nice of a smile as he could. But could you tell me what happened? There were several moments of silence, and for a moment he thought he would have to deal with an asleep concussed patient. The boy spoke quietly. I was thirsty. I headed to the gas station for a water bottle. And the clerk was a boy I knew in middle school. Didn't like me. At all caused the whole late bloomer pizzazz. Late bloomer? And a dash, the boy whines softly, trying to recall. He has this quirk to sedate waters. He could make water into drags. Kinda. But generally he doesn't cause it can be tracked back to him real easy. Did he? Hisashi trailed off. Did he drag your water, Midoriya? Came the dulled reply. I chugged it, I didn't think he'd do it, but, well Midoriya made a SO motion. Sal weighs a gamble. Hisashi physically grimaced at that. So, I walked home and Midoriya's brows furrowed. Hisashi paused in the wrapping of his head. SSS fuzzy. I think there were other guys. You were cornered, Hisashi winced. That's not a good situation for anyone. Then I was here, he shrugged. Can't remember much else. That's all right, kiddo, he murmured. Can you lift your arms up for me? I need to wrap your side. The kid followed the order and Shoyuta peeked in. Hisashi, she's on her way. Tell her she'll need naloxone. And paracetamol. And we're gonna need to call Tsukachi. Shuta's face instantly darkened. Yeah. That's my feelings on this situation too. Hisashi managed to get the green-haired boy into their living room and placed him on their reclining chair, instead of his usual couch, carefully listening to his speaking. The boy was rambling in English about some hero with his slurred and blurry mind, but Mike was just glad he was awake. Oh, the hero sounds interesting, Mike nodded. Tell me more. Shoyuta was across the room in the meantime, tapping his foot aggressively. Tsukachi, you find our perp? We've got a lead eraser. We're sending someone there as we speak. We already checked the nearby cameras and found nothing. We'll see what we can get from the a-hole. DMN right, he sighed. Just get back to me if you get something. Of course. It was another 10 minutes before a soft knock on the door and Shoyuta nearly slammed it open. There stood Recovery Girl with her medical bag and Netsu on her shoulder. Mom, Dad, he greeted in relief. Come on in. Where is my patient? She hummed. Shoyuta gestured to the couch, where Hisashi barely managed to keep a delusional and feverish Midoriya awake. I'll definitely need to. Consider that on my next episode. Hisashi smiled, strained. Remind me to never bully you about marrying a loudmouth again. Recovery Girl sighed and approached. Excuse me, Hisashi, I'll see the patient. Thank God, was the soft reply as the man ran off to get a glass of water. Netsu huffed, gingerly pulling out his laptop. Have you found the perpetrators yet? Netsu hummed. This had to have been planned. Not yet, Shoyuta confessed with a grunt. Tsukachi's working on it, but they've found, well, Jack's hit. The creature hummed thoughtfully before beginning to type away, and Shoyuta moved back to his mom's side, deciding he would probably need plausible deniability. His fever the woman grimaced. He's hitting 105, she muttered with a grimace. The head wound is sufficiently wrapped, but now his biggest problem is the overdose. Shoyuta, can you start in 4-line for me, dear, while I check his eyes? Yes, Mom. His fever should drop within the next few hours, but depending on what he took, it might go up or down, Chio explained. I've left you with fluids for the boy. Try to keep an eye on him. He'll likely be a bit delusional, so be mindful. Besides that, his other injuries can be healed the day he's able to get back to campus. Thank you, Hizashi bowed slightly. We couldn't have done anything without you, ma'am. None of that, Sonny, she chided, smacking his leg with her cane. Just care for the boy, won't you? Of course. As the two elders of the Yamazawa family left, Shoyuta and Hizashi looked at each other before slowly migrating back to the living room. Midoriya was at least healed now, but the fever would take time to drop. They collapsed by one another onto the couch. It was a slide of luck his phone brought us here, Shoyuta whispered. Hizashi nodded in fervent agreement before passing a glance to the boy. He was dozing, breath occasionally hitching. A light pink tint had settled over his freckles, radiating heat. I'm glad it did, Hizashi agreed easily. Did Tsukachi find the perps? Tsukachi got the spiker from the store. Dad found the perpetrators, and was feeling particularly vindictive. Hizashi grimaced. Heaven truly hath no fury like a fresh grandparent. Not sure if I can say they didn't deserve it for hurting our kid, Hizashi growled unconsciously, running a hand through his gold hair. Shoyuta huffed in agreement, leaning back. We're gonna need to keep an eye on him in shifts, Zashi. I know, the man murmured, passing a glance. I'm worried, Sho. What if he hadn't come to us? What if he didn't, what if he dash? Zashi, Shoyuta gently cut off his rambles. The what-ifs won't help him. He's here, and we got him treatment. Mom left extra if there's more in his system, his injuries are treated, and his fever is plateauing. I promise he'll be fine. He breaks his bones for fun, I don't. A little spiking will take him out of the game for long. Shuta's hand moved, intertwining with his, and he offered a small, reassuring smile. Hizashi did his best to return it. I might not be an optimistic person, Hizashi, but I know that brat. This won't keep him down. In the end, Hizashi got the first shift. He'd watch the boy from then till 3, then Shoyuta would take over till he needed to leave for school, and Hizashi would take the day off. A simple text to Nedzu was all it took for a substitute lined up. Wake me if you need anything, love, Shoyuta grunted. Hizashi cooed and pulled him in for a kiss. He ushered the man right into their bed with a smile. Aren't you the sweetest? Just get some sleep. I'll wake you up around your patrol time, Hizashi assured with one more kiss for added effect. Shoyuta just grunted, placing himself into their sheets and collapsing down. It had been a long night already, and it had just started for Hizashi. A short walk back, he placed himself on the couch by Midoriya, passing a glance to the boy. He dug out his phone, quickly checking the text they'd received from Recovery Girl about the boy's fever. Mama medicine. Have him take Advil or Tylenol every 4 hours so he sleeps. Check his temperature every 30 minutes and make sure it doesn't surpass 104 again. If it does, get in your car and get him to the hospital. When he wakes, get him to drink plenty of water. You can wet the bandages with cold distilled water to cool him down. Keep him calm. With the drags flushing from his system, it may be a bit rough. If he insists on getting dressed, only a light t-shirt and shorts. Ice packs can be used if needed. Stole ya, son. Thank you, Chio. I'll send this to Sho when it's his turn to watch the bean. Hizashi got right back up, heading to the kitchen sink and filling a bowl with water before grabbing a rag and a few ice packs. She had warned them before she left the first few hours would be the worst. A quick temperature check revealed a fever of 103, which wasn't good but was better. 2 ice packs under the kid's arms and then 1 placed onto the kid's forehead were the first priority. He quickly wet the rag with the cold water before laying it across the kid's forehead, which caused the kid's brow to furrow. It's all right, kiddo, he spoke softly, carefully and gently shifting the boy. We're just doing this to keep you cool. Every 15 minutes, Hizashi was careful to switch out the rag on his forehead after he took the boy's temperature. He was extremely grateful to see it was falling bit by bit. It was during one of these that Midoriya finally woke up. Hizashi was sat by the boy, carefully switching the cold compress out when he whimpered a bit. "Papa," the meek voice spoke. Hizashi jumped a bit, looking down at the boy. Hazy green eyes watched his. "Papa, I feel awful." He paused, allowing himself a moment to process all that before smiling at the boy. "It's all right, listener." He carefully ran a hand through the boy's hair. The sweat stuck to his hand, unfortunately, but the act of comfort seemed to reassure the sick child who leaned into the touch. "Can I do anything for you?" "Bucket." Hizashi knew that expression. In an instant, the boy had a bucket and was gagging and retching bile into it. "Oh, kiddo," he grimaced, gently rubbing circles into the boy's back. "There you are, let it all out." "Feelin' like bad," the boy muttered, laying back down. "Papa, are you gonna leave me?" And oh, how that made his heart ache. "I won't leave kiddo," he reassured. "I'll be right here." It took some time to get the boy properly readjusted before he replaced the ice packs with fresh ones. Midoriya's temperature had dropped a bit more. "I promise I won't leave you alone." "You're not alone any dash. Izuku. We're here for you, kiddo." When 2 came, he wondered if he really should wake his husband, feeling bad about leaving Izuku. He didn't want to leave the kid, but he had promised Shoyuta that he would. That they would trade so Hizashi could get in some sleep before watching the kid while he was at school. He raised a hand, running it once through his hair before walking over and running his hand through Izuku's curls once. "All right, kiddo," he spoke softly, fully knowing the boy wouldn't even hear or understand him. "I'm gonna get some sleep, so Sho will be with you for a few hours. You're doing great at dropping your fever." "I'm so proud of you," he assured. Izuku leaned into the touch with a quiet pleased noise and Hizashi smiled fondly. "You'll be feeling better in no time." And with an ounce of hesitation, he let go of the boy and headed back to their bedroom to wake his husband for his shift. He hadn't even realized how exhausted he was until he shook Shoyuta awake and took a 3-minute shower just to rinse off, before collapsing onto their bed and into oblivion. "Night, Zashi," was the last thing he heard before it all went dark. Hizashi was awoken at 7 with a grimace, sitting up slowly. He felt like death and rubbed his eyes with a grimace. Shoyuta was walking in, just about to wake up. He looked just as tired. "Zashi," the man greeted gently, leaning down and placing a kiss on his forehead. "The kid is fine. His fever dropped to 101 while you were asleep." "That's good," Hizashi muttered, too tired to fully process the words. He leaned into his husband's touch, taking a few moments to breathe before fully opening his eyes. They sat there for a few minutes, enjoying the quiet before Shoyuta placed another kiss on Hizashi's forehead. "I need to go get ready for school. I made some food for you and the kid if he feels up to it," Shoyuta explained, standing and heading to their bathrooms. The man slipped off his sleepwear, grabbing his hero uniform and putting it on. "Thanks, darling," Hizashi muttered a bit softer, rubbing his eyes and forcing himself to his feet. "Take plenty of naps today." "I will. Try to get some extra sleep, all right?" Shoyuta leaned back, placing a kiss on Hizashi's lips that time, before moving and getting ready. Hizashi migrated from their bedroom to the living room where Izuku was still sleeping. He didn't look as bad as yesterday, only a little pale. He slept more soundly with the ice packs still around him. Hizashi headed over, carefully brushing his hand through the kid's hair, smiling when Izuku leaned into it. "Well, the worst of the fever broke at least," he sighed in relief. Hizashi moved to the kitchen, peeking inside. There sat a classic English breakfast, French toast, and a fruit salad on the side. It all stayed on the warmers while the fruit salad was out. Just in time, Shoyuta came out of the bathroom and joined him in the kitchen. "Morning, Zashi," he murmured, leaning over and placing a kiss on his forehead. Hizashi returned it with one of his own. "Morning, love," Hizashi whispered back with a fond smile. "Thank you for breakfast." "Course." Shoyuta moved, digging into the cabinet before grabbing his own jelly pouch and a small bento. "I'll see you later. I gotta get there before the Hellions start doing Hellion things." Hizashi chuckled at his husband's antics but leaned over to return a kiss on the lips before he left. Shota allowed it before heading out the door. "Don't forget to sleep during the day, Zashi," Shota spoke, looking over. I'll be sleeping during work. Of course you will, Hisashi snorted. When don't you? Shota gave a small grin in response that got a cackle from his other half. Love you, Sho, have a good day. Love you too, Zashi. Hisashi watched his husband leave their flat with a fond smile before heading to the kitchen for breakfast. Once his plate was loaded, he headed back to the living room, plopped himself on the couch opposite Izuku, and turned the TV on low. Just us two, kiddo. The class was long and obnoxious. A few questions from the class about Izuku Midoriya and his whereabouts were met with stern glares and the response of, he called out sick, to his class's immense grief. Once the PR dis ended and it was time for lunch, he raised an eyebrow to see Toshinori, because he wasn't calling his coworker All Might when he was that thin, small Might more accurately, waiting outside the classroom. Oh, the man boomed a bit upon realizing he was there. Young Aizawa. Toshinori, he greeted, only dipping his head a bit further into his scarf. Why are you stalking outside my classroom? Oh, the man smiled. Have you seen young D. Midoriya? He and I need to have a discussion. Shota raised an eyebrow. I haven't, he lied easily. The boy called out of school. He was sick. Well, sick in this case was relative. More accurately, he was delirious and suffering immensely. Why didn't he just come in to see Recovery Girl then? She could have had him in tip-top shape in an instant dash. Her quirk doesn't work like that, he responded with a small glare. And relying on her for things like that is illogical. If Midoriya needs a day off to rest, he needs a day off to rest. Simple as that. Well, it's not just that, Toshinori grimaced, scratching his neck. The boy missed our weekend training session. He usually comes, even if he is sick. He and I need to have a discussion about his wavering work ethic. Shoyuta stared at the man, appraisingly for a moment. Toshinori didn't seem to realize this and kept talking, not even realizing how he was digging himself a grave. And with how little control he still has over the quirk, he doesn't seem to realize the seriousness of our meetings dash. We train plenty in school, Shoyuta raised an eyebrow. We have a rigorous schedule. If he's sick, he should be resting. Festering the idea that you should train beyond your limits is unreasonable and dangerous. The boy is rather stupid and lazy, Aizawa, the man's gaze sharpened. Shoyuta froze. He needs rigorous training to keep him on his toes. Weren't you the one who nearly expelled him on the first day for his lack of quirk control? Surely you understand that kind of attitude isn't becoming of a limelight hero, less so of someone who strives to become the next symbol of peace. Shoyuta had planned on putting the kid in Gen Ed when he realized the lack of quirk control, but on that first day, he knew he couldn't. I can still move, sensei. He held his hand in his arms, shaking. The bone in his finger had been pulverized, yet the boy grinned wide and smiled. That unshakable determination. If he could aim it in a less destructive manner, the kid would be a force to be reckoned with. He could see the action light a fire in his classmates' eyes. The kid had already become a beacon to them. Which means dash. Don't you dare dash, Shoyuta cut in, leveling the man with a quirk-enhanced glare. Ever call my students stupid or lazy again, All Might. My students work hard for what they have and put their all into everything they do. If they didn't, they wouldn't be in my class. The man coughed in surprise, a bit of blood spouting out. Get out of my way, All Might, or I'll do something I regret. The man moved. The first smart thing he's done, said the conversation started, and walked past him, making a mental note to talk to Izuku about proper self-care once he was more recovered. The boy was a bit more lucid at least, if a bit loopy still. His fever had dropped enough that his temperature didn't need to be taken every hour at least. Hisashi set the plate of food in his lap and sat by him. How you feeling, kiddo? Hisashi asked gently. The boy murmured a quiet assurance, shakily grabbing his fork and beginning to eat the food provided. Thank you, Yama, Izuku yawned, rubbing his eyes in a definitely not kitten-like way. The nickname of Yama practically had his heart melting, even if the kid was definitely not aware enough to realize he was doing it. Of course. Eat up then, let's get you some medicine so you can head back to sleep, all right? He smiled at the boy who gave a tired one back. Thank you for taking care of me, Yama. I know I'm a burden, he smiled softly. Hisashi paused before frowning and sitting by the boy. Izuku, he said, gently. The boy looked a bit surprised at the use of his given name. You are not a burden. Not ever. I am so glad you came to us. He spoke, stern but not mean. The boy looked flabbergasted. When Shoyuta and I told you that you could come to us at any time, we meant it. We care about you, Izuku. You will never be a burden. Not to us or to me. The boy stared in absolute shock before silent tears began to stream down his face. He leaned over to gently wipe them away without even thinking. Izuku sniffled, before taking Hisashi's close frame and hugging him as tight as he could. Hisashi was shocked into a frozen statue for a moment, before returning the hug as the boy began to sob. Stifled cries and tears came from the boy and waved, and Hisashi just held him. It's all right, kiddo. Let it all out, he reassured softly. He ended up falling asleep by Izuku, who'd fallen asleep on him right back. By the night, Shoyuta, Hisashi, and Izuku all sat in the living room eating dinner. Izuku's fever had subsided enough that he was clear. Shoyuta and Hisashi were just waiting for Shuta's mom to come and clear the kid of some of his other injuries. You can stay the night, Hisashi assured with a smile. If you're coming to school, I'd prefer you come ride in the car then go on public transport, you dig? All right. Izuku agreed with a smile. Thank you, Yamada-san. Would Hisashi admit he was already missing Yama? Not allowed to the boy, at least. We're just waiting on Recovery Girl. Shoyuta nodded and Izuku flinched. Neither adult missed it. Kid. Recovery Girl is coming? He asked, suddenly worried and a bit closed off. Hisashi and Shoyuta met each other's eyes. She's coming, Shoyuta confirmed, slowing down. Is that all right? Is she annoyed with me? For being such a... He trailed off, gaze falling to his hands. She said she wasn't gonna heal me anymore. 4 self-inflicted injuries. Both adults froze. Because what? Shoyuta took the opportunity to dig into his phone to make sure that he got to the bottom of this before they arrived. Hisashi instantly took over the conversation, pulling the boy into a talk about what had happened on the news, which seemed to work well enough as a distraction as Shoyuta slunk out. Dialing the familiar number didn't take long. I believe I told you I was on my way. The amused and slightly exasperated voice of his mother came through. You fret like new mothers dash. Why did the problem child just tell me you told him you wouldn't heal self-inflicted injuries? He said, a bit too sharp. He winced at his tone, but he was worried. He didn't want to believe his mom would say that for no reason. There was a few moments of silence before she responded. Because I told him after the sports festival, not that I wouldn't, but I couldn't heal more injuries like his pulverized bones, Shoyuta, she spoke levelly. During the sports festival, the amount of power he was emitting was beyond the scope of what I could heal with his stamina. Shoyuta took a moment, allowing himself to collect his panic, and took a deep breath. He misheard you, Shoyuta said, speaking softly. He thinks you won't heal him, or treat his injuries from what I've gathered. I was curious why I haven't seen him recently, she sighed. Here I was hoping that he had just stopped getting badly injured. Shoyuta took a short breath. I'll apologize to the boy, she responded without prompting. Relief filled him. I'll make sure to clarify what I meant to him. No need to worry, Shoyuta. Thank you, Mom. He let out a puff of relief. Thank you. You don't need to thank me for being a decent person, Shoyuta, she tisked. Most competent people can acknowledge when they've made a mistake. Within 10 minutes, Nedzu and Recovery Girl were at the door. Shoyuta nodded to them and moved aside so they could come in. None of the adults in the room missed how Izuku tensed when Recovery Girl walked in, and she just huffed. Dearies, can you leave him and me for a moment? I need to switch his bandages, she huffed. Izuku tensed a bit more, but the other adults just nodded. We're gonna head to the store to pick up some refills for the first aid hit, Hisashi smiled. That all right, kiddo? A subtle ask. Izuku took in a short breath before nodding. Why, yeah, that's fine. Within a few minutes, the two were left alone. I've heard, Chio started, gently unwrapping one of Midoriya's arms and looking over the bruises and cuts. that we've had a bit of a misunderstanding. A misunderstanding? The boy stuttered out, hiding behind his bangs. What do you mean, ma'am? Just Chio, dearie, she waved him off. I believe I've accidentally made you believe I wouldn't treat your injuries, correct? The boy flinched hard. Chio, to her credit, had anticipated that and tightened the bandages slightly around one of the worst wounds so it wouldn't be pulled open. No, it's not your fault. I shouldn't have implied, The boy was beginning to devolve into a panic spiral. Chio carefully removed her hands from the boy's arm and placed both of her hands under his. Dearie, she said a bit sternly. He stiffened up. It is not your fault. I should have realized that you not coming by my office didn't mean you weren't getting hurt, she huffed. I'm sorry for making you think that. It was my mistake because you are a child and I am an adult. It's my job to take care of you. The words seemed to shift the boy's worldview, as he openly gaped at her. On the day of the sports festival, what did you hear me say? Why, you said you wouldn't heal self-inflicted wounds, he spoke softly. She hummed before shaking her head. Close, but not exactly, she leaned back. I said, I couldn't heal your quirk's self-inflicted injuries, she clarified gently, moving back to continue wrapping the boy's arm. He tilted his head in confusion, almost mimicking Sardine, who copied the action from across the room. She barely managed to hold back a small snort. With your power output increasing so much, I can't safely heal the bones you break. We'd need to take you to the hospital for a proper fix. It wasn't a badly subtle way to encourage your control, but a warning. The boy's eyes widened almost to a comical degree. Why what? My quirk can only speed up the healing process, she hummed. Hairline fractures can be healed with time. But you, dear, were getting to the point that your bones were splintering. Izuku winced, ducking his head. If you were to fully shatter them again, I would not be able to heal them. We'd need to rush to the hospital so it could be properly set and fixed with surgeries I cannot do by myself. But the boy paused, more to think before grimacing. It seemed something connected in his brain. Oh. What's running through that brain of yours, dearie? She asked, gently rewrapping the boy's hand. And have you had the chance to make that appointment for your hands? I haven't, he ducked his head. I can't find out how to. I told Tashinori to help you, she'd sked before sighing. We can talk another day about it then, all right? I can't imagine your hands are comfortable. You can just say they always hurt, Chio-san, the boy giggles wetly. I know. I'm the one living with them. Chronic pain is a sad term, she tutted lightly. Especially for someone as young as yourself, dearie. She hummed, carefully finishing the bandages before humming. If you get hurt, I want you to come to me. No matter the circumstance. Allow me to help you figure out if you need my quirk, time, or the hospital. Don't hide things like this. You're a hero student, it'd be expected that you get hurt. Midoriya's shoulders dropped a bit in relief and he offered a small, shaky smile to her. Thank you, Chio-san. Just Chio, dear, she waved. Now, I want to check these tomorrow morning. Are you feeling better? Midoriya nodded, shakily smiling. Then come visit the clinic. I don't want you back in training or anything of the sort until next week, am I understood? Dizzy spells and such might hit, so be prepared. It comes with healing. That all right, Chio, he smiled. I understand. Finally, a student with common sense, she tisked. This'll probably sap your energy for the night, but it'll help with the bruises. He carefully kissed the back of his hand and the exhaustion smacked into him like a bus. He practically melted into the couch as the open cuts and bruises closed. She hummed in contentment before walking out to see the three others waiting outside the door awkwardly. You three can come in now. He's sleeping. Did you get it figured out with him? Shoyuta asked, trying to hide his worry. Chio just nodded and the tension left both Hisashi and Shuta's shoulders. Just a misunderstanding. Nothing a conversation can't fix. He's sleeping off my quirk now since I healed the bruises. He's not to be in any foundational heroics class until next week though, am I understood? Crystal, Shoyuta nodded sharply. Hisashi let a small smile cover his face. Thank you, Chio. Of course, It's clearly new to that boy being taken care of. I'm always happy to help, she responded. I believe it's time for Nedzu and me to head out. Of course. Nedzu chirped, hopping off Shuta's shoulder and Baichio. Will we see you both at school tomorrow? If the kid feels up to it, yeah, Shoyuta nodded, getting a hum of agreement from Hizashi. Bye Mom, Dad, Shoyuta waved them off. Hizashi took the chance to steal his husband's hand mid-wave, earning a snort from the man. Come on. Let's go lay down Zashi. I'm exhausted. The two barely got in the door when the couple saw the kid, practically melted into the couch he'd slept on the first night, before passing a glance to one another. A silent message was conveyed, and the two approached the sleeping boy. Hizashi grabbed the blankets off the other couch while Shoyuta gently lifted the boy under his legs and his back. Some adjustments and a blanket laid across the couch later, the kid was tucked into their couch, comfortably curled under some blankets. It didn't take long for the cats to realize this fact either, as all four ran over to swarm him. Neither missed the small smile that appeared on the kid's face. What was it your mom always says? Hizashi asked, fondly laying his head on Shuta's shoulder. You two will never adopt something more than a cat? I dunno, Shoyuta snorted. He makes a pretty good sad meow meow. I suppose you're right. He is a sad meow meow. The lights were blinked off and the two slinked off to their room for a proper night of sleep, calm and happy. Things were relatively calmer after that. One of the major changes was the kids started riding with them to school for the convenience of it all at Hizashi and Shuta's insistence. Even if the mandated break week had ended, they'd fought for him to keep just riding with them. It's illogical to spend extra money on public transportation if we're all going to the same place, had been the argument that won the kid over. At 7 o'clock, the kid was always at their house decked out in his UA uniform. Never a moment late. After a week of this, Hizashi discovered the kid would come 5 minutes early and just wait outside their door so he wouldn't be late. So Hizashi made an effort to open the door when the kid actually arrived to breathe the fresh air, happened to spot the kid coming in, and invite Izuku in to hang out with the cats until it was time to leave. The first week back had been a good one for the entire group. Mostly with the discovery of a certain notebook. It was Izuku's first sit out of the week, which yes, Shoyuta sat in on to make sure the kid was actually taking the PRD off. All Might didn't seem pleased, but with Shoyuta there to back up the kid's message. No, All Might, Recovery Girl hasn't cleared him. I don't care, he isn't doing suicides or sparring. Yes, for a full week. Well, you can shove your opinions up your ass dash. Aizawa kept an eye on the spars, mentally taking note of improvements that needed to be made. Uraraka often hesitated before she kicked, but never before a punch. That needed to be corrected. Ojiro was holding back against some of the students in the class, notably the girls. Aoyama was struggling completely with strength aspects and relied on his quirk too much. Quiet notes on improvements and styles when his gaze shifted and he saw Izuku off to the side. He decided to take the time to start the brat on analysis, mostly to see where the kid landed. It never looked like he had much of a clue, bullheading his opponents most of the time. Some strategies would definitely benefit the kid. He paused when he saw the kid did have the papers, but they were off to the side. Not even 2 matches had passed and the paper was all covered in scribbles he couldn't make out from that far away, but now the kid was writing in some notebook. Definitely an English notebook, it read. Shoyuta paused because that was suspicious. I mean, he wouldn't put it past the kid to have an English notebook labeled that suspiciously, but it didn't seem like it was. He kept peeking up at his classmates before going back to the notebook, flipping pages every few seconds. Once the match, this one between Kirishima and Sato, had ended, he called to the class, interrupting whatever All Might was about to say. Take 5 to stretch and prepare a strategy. You know your opponent. Use that. He shot a small glance to the blonde buffoon who looked a little offended that Shoyuta had taken his class. He just raised an eyebrow, challenging the man to say something to him. All Might, to his credit, just walked away. He quickly made a 180, heading for Izuku, who was hanging out under a tree with his notebook. The boy was chewing on his shirt as he wrote. Shoyuta quickly quieted his footsteps so he could take a peek over the kid's shoulder and whatever it was gibberish. The notebook, at least. The papers to the side were written in English, to his surprise, but furthermore only displayed the first of the 3 fights. And only on Uraraka and her quirk. He'd run out of space, Shoyuta dully noted. Shoyuta reached for the papers and barely had enough time to pull back before a quirk-enhanced hand reached for his wrist, fully prepared to break it for the papers, and paused when he saw who it was. Problem child, Shoyuta responded, desperately attempting to hide the tiny bit of panic but immense enthusiasm at his kid's spatial awareness. Just me. Oh my gosh, I'm so sorry Izao. The kid instantly started, going bright red. I didn't mean to, I'm so sorry dash. Kid, he cut him off. It's fine. Did you run out of paper? Izuku stared at him for a moment, before nodding slowly. Yeah. I got to analyze Uraraka, but I ran out of room for anyone else. So I moved it to my notebook. I can transcribe it later for you sensei, even if it's just fanboy rambling. The boy moved to sheepishly scratch at the back of his neck before offering him the papers. Shoyuta raised an eyebrow to the boy before carefully grabbing the papers and beginning to read over them. Then he read them again. Then once more. What the F dash? He muttered, more to himself but being heard by several of the more perceptive students. Jiru coughed and Shoji looked away. Is Midoriya, this is? Fanboy rambling, to you? The boy went red, ducking his head into his chest. I know it's bad. But quirk analysis has always been a hobby of mine. I might not be very good but I n dash. Kid, this is professional level analysis, he muttered quietly, reading it over once more just to check. You even have some suggested gear? Of course, the boy smiled emphatically, not seeming to hear the first comment. I study a lot of heroes and with a quirk as versatile as Uraraka-chan I can imagine her benefiting from a lot of it. Of course, adjusted and such but that's slightly off to the side and would take more time a dash. The kid began to mutter softly, moving to grab his notebook again before returning to another page. Shoyuta managed to catch a drawing of Uraraka on the first page in her hero uniform as he flipped a few pages before writing. And somehow, the most terrifying thought was, oh DMN it. I'm going to need to give him to Dad. Shoyuta swiped the papers before stuffing them into his pockets, because he sure as hell wasn't letting anyone else see these, lest they use them to, kill Uraraka. It was much safer if they were encoded within Izuku's notebooks. Midoriya, he looked over and the boy snapped from his mumbling fit. Feel free to just write them in your notebooks then. We can just talk about them later, deal? I trust you to not slack off. Please slack off. Of course sensei. Izuku smiled. Plus ultra. Minute. He gave a strained nod which the boy didn't catch as he went back to his notes. He headed back to the others, beginning to lead them to their next matches, and sighed. The end of the day came far too fast and he practically sprinted to his dad's office and slammed the door open. He kept it locked for meetings anyway. Dad. Ned's eyes met his. I've found something terrifying I've decided I'm not dealing with. It's your problem. He slapped down Uraraka's analysis onto his dad's table before sitting down. Ned's eyes scanned the paper, gleaming with interest. You can have him dash. Ned's eyes lit up. After the second semester starts. You, my dear son, would make me wait to cater to such a mind? Nedzu spoke innocently. Don't pull the dear son crap with me, he deadpanned. Second semester, final deal. Deal. Nedzu chirped in delight. Good. Now, I'm leaving and am decidedly not going to have a crisis about this. Of course. Goodbye, son. Shoyuta didn't look back. His levels of character had been drained. After that, and for a few weeks after, things finally calmed down. With Izuku visiting them every other weekend or so to eat, it was nice. Then, the day before winter break started, Izuku had spoken to them. My mom's home for the break, he smiled widely. She's been so busy lately, I'm glad she's taking a vacation. She and I are going to be spending a lot of time so I don't think I'll have time to come by. Neither adult knew why their stomachs twisted at the words. The kid looked genuinely so happy. She left me a note that she's gonna be home a lot more since things have gotten better at work, and I didn't want you to worry about me, he smiled sheepishly. Oh, Hisashi forced himself to smile brightly, ignoring his churning stomach. I'm glad to hear it, kiddo. We actually ate together last night. He'd said excitedly. He looked so happy. Had some miso soup. That's good, Shoyuta nodded, also ignoring the churning anxiety. Hisashi tried to keep his eyes bright, but he couldn't ignore the guilt bubbling up his throat like bile. He isn't our kid. I shouldn't be so distraught about this. Hisashi swallowed down the pang of jealousy and just nodded. As long as you're happy, kiddo, he smiled. Spending the holidays together should be super fun. Oh yeah, Izuku looked at them. Didn't you mention that you and Aizawa-san are going on a trip during the last week of break? We're visiting America, Shoyuta confirmed. Neither had chosen to bring up they had been debating canceling the vacations so Izuku wouldn't be left alone. I hope you have fun. The boy smiled so cheerily it couldn't be anything but truthful. Oh, before I go I brought you two something dash. The two adults looked at one another before back to the kid. I'm still working on the sewing and they're really silly, but I really wanted to show you how much I appreciated all you've done for me. He dug into his bag, before finally pulling out 4 hand-sewn stuffed animals. One that looked like Toffee, one that looked like Sardine, one that looked like BSRD, and one that looked like Martha. I know you both tend to get headaches from your schedules, so you can warm them up in the microwave and put them over your eyes to help. He began to babble, emphatically waving his hands in accordance with his words. They're each scented differently because I realized the cats actually like different scents because Toffee likes the smell of coffee, while Sardine likes vanilla, Martha likes lavender, and BSRD likes mint. The two took the stuffed animals and felt a pang of absolute rapture as they looked over them. The stitches weren't perfect, and the noses were a bit off-center, but they're perfect, Hisashi said softly, smiling and letting a few tears slip down his face. Thank you, Izuku. I can see the resemblance, Shoyuta nodded, determinedly not crying and definitely not hiding his emotions in his capture scarf. You've gotten BSDRD's nose perfect. The boy looked so happy, the couple's guilt and jealousy panged away in an instant. Because that smile was something they were going to protect. If the kid was happy, did it matter if it was with them or someone else? So long as the kid was happy, smiling and carefree in the way all kids should be allowed to be. It didn't matter if the kid wasn't theirs. Who wasn't theirs? Of course, it matters. Neither was 100% sure if the crying was completely from the happiness of the gifts. Zashi? Shoyuta asked softly. Hisashi was staring blankly at their suitcases as they were finishing packing for their trip. It didn't feel right. Love, can you talk to me? Shoyuta asked, a bit softer. Hisashi couldn't help the way his chest heaved in a breath, and he pulled his eyes from the suitcase to sit down. He couldn't breathe. Darling, we do this because we love you. You ungrateful brat. Hisashi dear, don't you realize? You'll never be popular looking like that. You Dimon Pig. I wish I left you at the hospital. I wish we never met. He came back in time to see Shoyuta on a knee in front of him, holding his face in his hands. Hisashi, are you back with me? I'm sorry, Shoyuta, he whispered softly, not able to meet his husband's eyes. Don't do that, Shoyuta gently chastised, moving to hold one of Hisashi's hands. Talk to me. What's wrong? What's going on? Hisashi's eyes moved to the 4 stuffed animals that sat on their bedside tables. I feel like we're leaving him. Shoyuta paused, hands stiffening for a moment before he let out a short sigh, and moved to sit by his husband. They sat in silence for a long few minutes. It doesn't feel right. We get Namuri to look after the cats and the plants, we get Nedzu to cover the meetings, but dashed. Who do we have to look after Midoriya? Shoyuta finished softly. What if he goes hungry? What if he gets hurt and we aren't here? What if dash? Hisashi, put down the pills. I'm nothing, Shoyuta. I never was. I don't deserve to be alive. I'm a burden dash. Zashi, Shoyuta gently nudged him back to reality. Can you count to 5 for me? Up and down. Hisashi tried to shake it off. 1. Please, I'm hungry. Can you spare any change? I'm sorry, dash. Die in a ditch, brat. If you're hungry, go beg some rich man for money. You've got the body of a were anyways. 2. A strike across the face. You can sleep on the streets. We put up with you and this is what we get. He's been busy. He's a UA student now dash. Even more reason to get rid of him. They can have him and kill him for all I care. 3. He frantically searched each of his bags and his heart dropped to his stomach. The cassette player from Oboro and Shoyuta. Missing. I sold it, a voice cut in. Consider it your rent. 4. Go home, kid, the police officer glared. We aren't going to take care of a brat. 5. Good, Shoyuta assured gently, rubbing circles into Hisashi's hands. Back down. 5. He was hungry. 4. His head was throbbing, black spots peeking at the edges. 3. He wasn't back there. He wasn't back there. 2. He was safe, sitting by his husband in his flat. 1. His husband who would never throw him on the streets. Who would never intentionally hurt him. Who'd never call him a burden. There you are, Shoyuta spoke softly, squeezing once on Hisashi's hands. See. Here I am, Hisashi repeated, closing his eyes for a moment before opening them to stare at his husband. Here I am. What's wrong? Shoyuta asked again, gentle as always. They sat in silence for several minutes, Shoyuta giving Hisashi time to gather his thoughts, before he spoke. I don't want the kid to feel like we're leaving him. You don't trust the situation, Shoyuta nodded. We haven't seen him in 2 weeks, Sho. What if, once we leave, he needs help? Does he have anyone? And I know we made this trip but dash. Hisashi, Shoyuta gently interrupted him. Hisashi looked at him through watering eyes and couldn't help the small sigh at the understanding in Shuta's eyes. I hear you. Why don't we come up with a plan? We bought these tickets. It'd be a waste of money, our plan, so much wasted dash. Why don't, Shoyuta interrupted gently. Why don't we send them to Nemuri, as a thank you? That way, they're not going to waste and there's no wasted money. You're not, aren't you mad? Hisashi asked softly, meeting his eyes. We planned this together dash. And I'll prioritize your emotions any day, Shoyuta responded without hesitation. If you aren't going to enjoy it, stressing over the kid as we are, why should we go? I suppose it would be silly, he muttered softly, and Shoyuta offered a rare, small gentle smile back. Then we can reschedule for another day. America isn't going to disappear overnight, Hisashi. I bet my sister would love to come over for the holidays to visit. Though you'll likely be subjected to another interview on your radio show. He grinned and Hisashi couldn't help his snort. Oh, the agony of having my husband being related to someone who is married to a famous person. My show will never recover. He snorted and Shoyuta smiled right back. I'll choose you any day, Hisashi. Izuka didn't show up during the week, but neither were sure how to feel about it. It was the Tuesday back that Shoyuta received a text at lunch. Pops, you two have a scheduled meeting in conference room 4 today. Apologies for no prior warning. He stared at the message for a few moments, debating everything before sighing and picking up his bags. His class had already cleared out, leaving just him and his poor, shrinking nap time. It didn't take long to arrive to the teacher's lounge and he found Hisashi outside it, waiting. Sho, the man greeted, happy as ever. Ready for the meeting? You got invited too? He raised an eyebrow and Hisashi smiled back. I did. Don't know what it's about though, he confessed, raising a hand to scratch at his neck. Any clues from your dad? No, Shoyuta sighed, moving to the door. Has anyone arrived? Not a clue, I haven't gone in yet. Shoyuta allowed himself a short sigh before moving to the door. With a twist of the handle, the door cracked open. And inside, was the problem child. Drawing in a notebook with shaky hands, looking rather exhausted. Hisashi and Shoyuta spared each other a glance. He hadn't looked this bad in their other classes and Hisashi grimaced, pointing at his sleeves, at the boy then signing, concealer. Shoyuta spared a glance, seeing the makeup smeared on his sleeves. On cue, the boy yawned, reaching up and rubbing at his face like a particularly cute cat, and Shoyuta froze. Hisashi looked over, catching his expression, and hissed softly. Don't effing say it, Shoyuta. The man looked away before mouthing. Sad meow meow. I regret marrying you some days. At that, Izuku finally looked up and the two entered the room. Izuku just watched them as they plopped down on the couch opposite of him, and Shoyuta reached into his bag, pulling a jelly pouch out. There were several minutes of silence. The kid seemed to be gathering his thoughts, but Hisashi and Shoyuta both gave him time. Hisashi also took the time to catalog the boy. He looked exhausted, a bit pale. His hands were torn up and his fingers were shaking. He looked just like he did before they started meeting and checking in on the boy. And didn't that hurt? He started before stopping. It took a few moments for him to regather himself, but he spoke again. What do I need to do to become a ward of UA? Both adults paused. They looked to one another, and Hisashi took the initiative. I thought you said things were getting better with your mom? He asked gently. The boy couldn't meet their eyes, tucking his head into his chest. Kiddo. I lied, he murmured, twisting his hands in a painful manner. Both adults winced. I'm sorry. It didn't get better. I just thought it would. Hisashi and Shoyuta both grimaced at that, and they both heard the kid's stomach growl. All right, Izuku. Can you tell us what happened? Hisashi spoke. And we'll go from there. The boy fidgeted, neatly tearing off a decent piece of skin from his hands, which got Shoyuta digging into his bag before placing a new tangle in his hands. Izuku paused, staring at it for a solid minute before looking up at Shoyuta. Don't tear your hands apart, kid, he spoke more gently than usual. Hands are delicate. Give them a break. What happened to your other one? Mom ripped it apart, he murmured. Said I wasn't a little kid. Didn't need stupid little toys. Both adults winced at that. He began to play with the tangle again though, and his hands were given a break. What happened? Hisashi asked again. You told us before break that things had been getting better and she'd been coming home. Midoriya hesitated, tucking his head a bit. We aren't mad, Shoyuta assured carefully. The boy took in another short breath before speaking. She did come home, he spoke quietly. Before the break. I didn't lie about that. I hadn't seen her in months. Not since before the middle school graduation. Both adults winced at that. And she was around. She hadn't bought food or left money or anything. But she was there. So I was just trying to be better? I thought he paused before taking in a short breath. I thought maybe if I was better, she'd stick around? Oh kid, Shoyuta muttered softly. I was cleaning. And staying in my room when she had guests over. I didn't even bother her. I did laundry and I was trying so hard. He looked down at the tangle. I thought, maybe if I proved I wasn't the selfish child I always was, she'd stay this time. You aren't selfish, Hisashi spoke low. You're a child, Izuku. It wasn't your dash. It was my fault, Midoriya scrubbed at his face. But I thought if I showed that I'd gotten better, she'd stay. I thought I'd be better off gone, Hisashi whispered to a younger Shoyuta. I couldn't prove I was worth being cared for. Shoyuta passed a full gaze over to Hisashi. The man had spoken the exact same excuses all those years ago, and the way Hisashi's eyes were tearing up was a clear indication. They knew something was. But, Friday, she told me to pack my bags. That she was selling the apartment, he murmured, scrubbing harder. She said that I didn't prove myself to her. That's I'm still the same selfish brat I've always been. I didn't even realize she'd sold some of the merch I'd collected. I'd left it out since she hadn't been home and he trailed off, shaking his head. Hisashi physically flinched at the mention of Izuku's stuff being sold. So I got my remaining stuff and left. She even wrote me a note of proof and said she was leaving the country. So he ducked his head to his chest. I have to become a ward, or I won't be able to afford tuition, he murmured. And I can't lose UA. It's all I have left at this point. Izuku, Shoyuta spoke carefully. Could we see the note? The boy dug into his bag before handing over a paper. Are you all right with us reading it? I don't care, the boy confessed softly. Shoyuta took careful care in opening it and reading it. Dear Izuku, this will be our final conversation. I cannot live in a house with a child like you. I've worked so long and so hard to give you everything you want and need, and it's never been enough. You've never cared about me or my needs. I could have had a good relationship, money, and friends, but you were so consistently a bother in my life. You used me and I cannot handle it any longer. You didn't prove yourself in these last 2 weeks. Constantly looking to me as if expecting something. What? Praise for doing what you're supposed to? Love for being a burden? Pack your bags. Good luck with following your fever dream. You'll die soon within that line of work. You were never a strong or smart child. I hope your dreams were worth losing me. Sincerely, Inko Midoriya. P.S. Don't contact me. And I'd appreciate it if you took my name off yours. I'm Inko Midoriya. You're simply Izuku. I don't want to be associated with you any longer. Hisashi could watch the way Shuta's face contorted into anger before he placed the note into his hands and stood up. I'll be back in a minute. Shoyuta dismissed himself and left the room. Hisashi knew how he felt. His gut feeling had been right. He closed his eyes when he heard the sound of things being broken on the other side of the door, but changed his glance to the direction of Izuku, who looked so sad, so broken, so lost. Izuku, he spoke softly. I'm sorry for making Aizawa-san mad. Izuku dipped his head to his chest in shame. I can't lose you. I can't lose it. I would have dealt with it myself if I could. Hisashi remembered speaking those exact words. Izuku. The boy's dull eyes met his. How many times did he see that exact expression in the mirror? He moved to gently take the boy's hands in his, not allowing himself to flinch at the feeling. Crooked hands, raw skin, and open wounds. The kid was literally and physically tearing himself apart. What she did was not your fault. There was nothing you or anyone could do to stop her from leaving. Because I'm useless, the boy murmured. Hisashi shook his head. Because she's a cruel person for making a child think they need to prove they deserve love, he corrected softly, moving to tuck a stray green hair behind the boy's ear. All kids deserve love, Izuku. There's nothing you can do to make that untrue. Her love being conditional was unreasonable and mean. Love isn't conditional, Hisashi-san, Netsu spoke to him. All children deserve to know love. True, unconditional love and support. Wide green eyes met his. Did you mean that, Yamada-san? I do. He offered a gentle smile to the boy. And Shoyuta and I would be happy to help you become a ward of UA if that is what sounds like the best plan. We just got to talk about the situation, all right? Tears began down the boy's face, and it seemed that a dam broke as the boy began to sob. Hisashi didn't hesitate, moving couches and pulling the boy close, running hands through dirty green curls. It was a while before the boy was calmed down enough to talk, sniffling and red-eyed. Shoyuta had come back too, so they could continue the meeting. All right, kiddo, Hisashi smiled as warmly as he could. Can you tell us where you've been staying? Be behind the support labs, he sniffled, rubbing at his face. The first-year dump site. Both adults carefully managed their expressions, Shoyuta being the one to continue. And how long have you been there? 5-ish days, the boy replied softly. I stayed at Teach the 24-hour laundromat the first night, but left during the day. Then, I spent the night in an alley, and the D decided to move to sleep closer to UA. The confession was heartbreaking, and Hisashi very carefully took in a few deep breaths to steady himself. All right, kiddo. Hisashi leaned forward, interlocking his hands to fight off his own habit of tearing his hands. He'd need to invest in another tangle. How are you feeling? Tired? Hungry? Tired, he agreed, nodding. Hungry, Hiki. He looked down at himself and winced before determinedly looking away from either adult. IT tried to clean up before C-class, but I didn't have much. I brought my concealer and some of my makeup, but I didn't have many products to start with, he grimaced, hiding his face in his hands. I'm sorry. No shame, kid, Shoyuta responded, leaning back. Do you think you want to go check in with Chio? The kid shook his head. Not that bad. All right, Shoyuta nodded, easily accepting the answer. We'll have to get CPS involved. The police too. Child abandonment is a serious crime, he began to explain. Hisashi nodded along with the conversation. I can call in a few favors so you won't need to worry about a group home or orphanage. We can get you right where you want to be without much hassle. Hizashi looked over. In this case, a ward of UA. Shoyuta paused a bit, looking at Hizashi and raising a silent eyebrow. Hizashi sent a glance back, which the man seemed to understand. This isn't something we should push right now. That, or anything else, Shoyuta negotiated before turning back to Izuku. As a ward of UA, Hizashi and I would probably take you as our ward. So we basically get you a free card into the program. It'll protect you and your tuition and provide somewhere to live. The on-school dorms. You'd be given money every week for food, necessities, and anything else you could need or want. It's not a terrible lot, but it's livable. Though I think you'd be the only current ward, Hizashi hummed. Izuku sat, thinking before nodding. That sounds like a good idea. Until the paperwork and such goes through, Shoyuta cut in. However, you'll need someplace to stay. So Hizashi and I will use our emergency foster license if you're okay with that. Please work on the sad meow meow. Please let his husband's sad meow meow powers work. Wouldn't I be an inconvenience on you too? He asked softly. Of course not. Shoyuta raised an unimpressed eyebrow. I believe I told you before, I don't do anything I don't want to. And frankly, I'd rather you be cleaned up in our home than on the streets. Izuku sniffled and began to rub at his face. His eyes were swollen and red, and it was obvious everything had taken its toll on him. Leave all the work to us, all right? Hizashi smiled at the boy. We'll take care of all the difficult stuff. You just work on feeling better, all right? Thank you for caring about me, the boy whispered, standing and bowing a full 90 degrees. Thank you dash. Deep breath, kid, Shoyuta gently chastised. We can talk about more specifics another night, all right? But let's get you taken care of. You aren't looking the best. He sniffled and rubbed his face again. Thank you, Yamada-san, Aizawa-san dash. I knew something was effing wrong, Hizashi muttered softly once the kid was out of earshot. If I see the woman, I reserve all rights to DJ punch her in the face. Heard and respected, Shoyuta hummed. The kid was tucked into their shower, and the couple were joined in the office. A quick clean to it so the kid would have a sense of privacy. Papers were all moved to the closet, boxes and other stuff into the hallway closet. Hizashi, Shoyuta looked over. Why aren't we pressing to just adopt him? The kid's emotional progress just got shot in the back, he responded bluntly. His mom just single-handedly killed all the trust we were beginning to foster between the kid and adults, We gotta give him time to come back out. We can jump to that question once things settle back down. He's technically our ward because we're putting him in the program. Shoyuta looked back at him in a minor bit of shock, as Hizashi cleared the dresser of all the paintings they kept in it. If the first day Nedzu found out where you were living, do you think you'd accept being adopted on the first day? It took you what? 5 months of being a ward for him to even approach you. I guess not, he sighed, turning back to his corner. I guess I'm just impatient. I feel the same, Hizashi offered a tired smile. I don't like the idea of the kid, but his trust is probably shot. Let's give him some time to extend the olive branch. In the meantime, we can invite him out of the school dorms on weekends. There was a long stretch of silence between them, a tension lying in the air. Finally, Shoyuta spoke. The fact he trusted us enough to come here is totally because of my magic power on stray cats, Shoyuta commented, face entirely serious. Clearly, him being a sad meow meow dash. Dash. Hizashi snorted, unable to hold back the laughter. Shuta's face was entirely serious as he held up a finger hushing his husband. I mean it, Zashi. My magical power on cats only works on him because he is also a sad meow meow. Therefore, I am a cat god. The man gave his signature Cheshire grin and Hizashi couldn't help it, tumbling to his knees and laughing into the floor. I said it from the beginning. I knew at a glance he wasn't a kid, he was a kitten. Hizashi's eyes began to water with how hard he was laughing as he curled into himself on his knees. Kami Shoyuta. Finally, the room was cleared with one final box in the closet, leaving an empty room with just a desk and a side table. Shoyuta leaned down to press a kiss on Hisashi's head. Things will be fine, he smiled. I may be impatient, but I guess this is one of those worth waiting for things. Yeah, Hisashi chuckled, wiping his face. Let's go get that air mattress set up for the kid, alright? Alright, Sho. The kid had been subjected to Hisashi's backstock of put your hands up merch for sleepwear, but the kid didn't seem terribly upset about this fact. Fully showered now and looking not unlike a freshly cleaned feral cat. He was pale and his scars were on display for the couple, at least those hidden by his shirt. But a bruise around his shoulder and the bruise on the side of his face were concerning enough. Shoyuta looked to Hisashi, asking a silent question. Hisashi took the initiative. Hey kiddo, you need some bruise cream? Simple. The kid flinched, raising a hand to the bruise, but Hisashi just patiently waited. They stared at one another for a few moments before Izuku spoke. I didn't want to use any without your permission, he finally spoke. Hisashi nodded and stood up, making a hand to gesture for the kid to follow. Izuku did without much prompting. They arrived to the bathroom and Hisashi went for their medical drawer, because with an underground hero like Shoyuta, it was needed, and dug out some of their spare bruise cream. Do you want me to help you put it on, or would you rather do it yourself? He spoke softly, not forcing the boy to meet his eyes. Izuku's eyes were determinedly on the floor. Aren't you going to ask me what happened? Forced me to tell you? It was spoken softly. You'll tell me what you did, his father snapped. Or I'll effing beat it out of you. I won't, he responded softly. But I hope you'll come around to tell me when you're ready. Izuku watched him, eyes scanning for a lie, and he didn't allow himself to hide his expressions. He let his concern, worry, and every other little emotion drip through, and it seemed to be what pushed the boy. I don't want to talk about. Right now, at least, the boy whispered, meeting his eyes. Maybe another time? Whenever you're ready, Hisashi agreed. The bruise cream? I just know it's a little easier when someone else applies it. Shaky hands tend to make the process a bit rougher. More painful, more specifically. Izuku hesitated, before nodding. His soft voice whispering and near silent. Please. Hisashi nodded and made a small gesture for Izuku to take a seat, and he sat across from him on the side of the tub. He made sure to choreograph his movements, not letting Izuku's minor flinches get to him as he got the bruise cream on the side of the kid's face and his shoulder. It was a nasty bruise. We can get you some ice for it too, Hisashi spoke softly. Shoyuta and I cleaned out the guest bedroom for you so you can sleep somewhere a bit quieter and you can have a bit of privacy. It'll be a few days arranging with CPS before we can get you to be a ward of UA, but with my emergency foster license, we won't need to worry about them taking you anywhere, alright kiddo. He leaned back with the bruise cream, setting it aside so he could grab some bandages. Alright, Yamada-san. The boy didn't flinch as much when Hisashi applied the bandages around the bruises, making sure they were plenty loose. Thank you for having me. We care about you kiddo, Hisashi responded gently. We'd take you any day. A whisper of a smile spread on the boy's face. Mind if I have your hands? They're a bit torn up, listener. Rather take care of them now so they can heal while you play with your tangle. The boy looked down at his hands in shame. Ikano Izausen says a hero's hands are one of their most important assets, and I was supposed to stop, but I dash. Izuku, Hisashi gently interrupted. Izuku flinched, bending down just a bit more. Hisashi smiled softly, gently taking one of the kid's hand within his own. Look at my hands. Izuku paused, confused by the comment before looking down, and his eyes widened. Of course, it wasn't something Hisashi showed off. He wore his leather gloves during the day and tended to keep his hands tucked in his pockets or interlocked with shoulders when he could. But well, pop me kettle. I always picked my hands, he smiled, chuckling softly. Bitors scratched. Shoyuta gave me my first tangle too. But he gave me a Rubik's Cube first. Unfortunately, he didn't realize I was very much colorblind. That got a decent snort from the kid. I could only solve it so many times before Shoyuta gave up on me and gave me a tangle. Why you didn't solve it, did you? Izuku laughed. Not once, Hisashi smiled wide, allowing himself to laugh a bit as well. Trust me, kiddo, even now I have days where I pick at my hands. It's not the best habit, but the important thing is you recognize it. Not all recovery is linear, you dig? Izuku smiled weakly while Hisashi carefully put some antibiotic on the bigger patches of missing skin, before bandaging over his hands. I dig, the kid finally responded. Hisashi snorted. Glad to hear it. It didn't take long, but the conversation trailed off while Hisashi wrapped Izuku's hands. It wasn't uncomfortable and Hisashi filled the silence with quiet humming. From where they sat, Hisashi could hear Shoyuta cooking in the kitchen. He listened a bit before looking back. Looks like we're having curry tonight, kiddo, he chirped. Izuku brightened up a bit, his stomach loudly growling in response. How can you tell? I can't really smell it. Gotta listen, Hisashi responded with a sly smile. He chopped stuff up, hard stuff. Vegetables. Water was put in a pot, meaning dash. He's boiling something. Like rice or noodles? The kid spoke up softly. Correctamundo. He grinned. And I heard a few cans opening. Coconut milk, maybe? The boy offered. So, a sweet curry? Rather than something with broth. Well, he chirped, securing the last bit of bandage. Let's see if you're right about it. He stood up, carefully helping Izuku up after as they headed out. Hisashi didn't miss, nor mention, how Izuku gently held a bit of his shirt as he followed him out of the bathroom. He just allowed himself to smile softly. They both arrived to the kitchen where, in fact, Shoyuta had his apron on and was making a sweet curry. The sweet coconut curry sat in the pan, simmering with a low heat while he seemed to be kneading some dough they had left over. Based on the size and the garlic butter in the pan, are you making naan? Izuku asked softly from behind Hisashi and Shoyuta looked over. I am, he confirmed, flattening out another dough ball and putting it into the skillet. Thought a side with the curry could be good. See, can I help? The hope and genuine excitement in the kid's eyes was so and sweet. Put on some gloves and you can knead, Shoyuta agreed. Hisashi. I'll go finish setting up the bedroom, love. He leaned over, placing a gentle kiss on Shuta's cheek before leaning in to whisper. Maybe all trust wasn't lost. Shoyuta returned his smile with a small one of his own. All right, problem child, let's get these flattened out since we'll be frying them. Hisashi left Izuku and Shoyuta in the kitchen, grabbing a pair of sheets on his way to the bedroom. The bed was already inflated, to his luck, and he carefully put the sheets on over it. As he got them on, his eye caught something moving in the corner and he spun around with a squeak, prepared to fight off the intruders. All four cats sat on the desk, staring. Waiting. Martha had just jumped up, watching him. He stared at the four cats who blinked in synchrony. Is this a cult thing? He whispered softly to the cats. Do I need to worry about Izuku? The cats blinked again. Please don't pop the bed. I know it can handle you four, but don't try to pop the bed. I promise this isn't permanent, it's just till we get the kid a bed of his own. He got the top sheet and comforter on. The cat cult blinked again. Cammy, he muttered, turning away. Fluffing the pillows they'd found and adding the cases, mentally starting a list. A bed frame, a new mattress. Some pillows. Maybe some throw blankets? Sardine mewed, getting his attention. Sardine's paw bapped at a piece of paper and pen that appeared from somewhere. The other cats watched him eerily. Are you trying to tell me to write it down? He asked cautiously. The cats meowed in sync. Terrifying. Have you for just accepted Izuku as one of your own or? They all meowed. Oh God, he is a sad meow meow in a sad meow meow cult dash. Hisashi. The cats are not in a cult. Shoyuta yelled from the other room. The four unblinking gazes on him suggested otherwise. He slowly backed out of the room once his job was done. He wasn't gonna regret taking in the kid, but those cats might actually kill someone for him. Actually, is that so bad? Maybe having a group of meow meows as a battalion for the kid would be effective. He paused when he saw Izuku staring at him in the hallway. Large, unblinking eyes watching him for a moment with a blank expression before disappearing around the corner. Sad meow meows, Everywhere dash, he whispered in both revelry and horror. Dinner was a quieter affair than usual with the kid, but given how tired he was, it wasn't surprising. Izuku's attempts to offer help had been completely shut down by Shoyuta, who ushered him off into the bedroom. They'd prepared for him. The cats seemed to be the tipping point as the moment Izuku was gently pushed onto the bed, they swarmed the kid with a frenzy and cuddled around him, purring up a storm. "You legally can't move a purring cat," Shoyuta said completely seriously. "It's against the law." 100%. When the two peeked in a bit later, the kid had fallen asleep, all four cats around him keeping him cemented to the bed. They shared a nod with the cats, who nodded back to the couple's confusion and mild horror. The following morning was when things started off. Shota's late-night patrol had ended just in time to run into Izuku at their door. The two almost crashed into each other, shocking Shota enough that he wrapped the kid in the scarf. "Kami kid dash," he whispered, staring at Izuku who was sheepishly staring back. "It is 5 am, why are you awake dash?" I have to start training at 5, Hizasan," the boy responded, just as quietly. "I always start out with a morning run. I meant to tell you last night but, dash," the boy went red. "The cats were really warm. And toffee and sardines were purring on my hands and I accidentally fell asleep." 5 am seems a bit insane of a time to start it, problem child, Shoyuta sighed. "We already do foundational heroics. Why not train after school?" "It doesn't fit into my trainer's schedule," he responded, opening and closing his fists in a grounding way. "Before is the only time that he can do it, so I run for 30 minutes before we meet so I am warmed up before we start." "Trainer?" Shoyuta raised an eyebrow. "I didn't see anything about a trainer on your file." It's not an official thing," the boy meekly offered. "He trains me on his off time. It's WW don't use quirks," he insisted, waving his hands in a familiar, frantic motion. "It's just building strength and such." Shota's thoughts trailed to the texts he'd seen that felt like so long ago at this point. It had been barely over a month in reality. "Is he the reason you've been cleaning up dump sites?" Shoyuta inquired, shuffling the kid back inside before closing the door. "Why, though my time to clean them is getting shorter and shorter," the boy confessed with a sheepish smile. "It took 10 months to clean up Dagoba Dash." "Wait, that was you?" Shoyuta interrupted, looking at him. "And if you're cleaning a junkyard, where is your gear?" The boy shrunk under his stern gaze. "Kid, they don't have any, Aizawa-san." Shoyuta sat, considering it all for a minute. Really considered it, before sighing and rubbing his forehead. Hizashi had said things needed to be approached slowly. Rebuilding trust and that. "All right," he relented. The kid jumped, looking at him with wide eyes. "Let me grab you some gear to bring to wherever you're cleaning, all right? And when you get back, we will be disinfecting any injuries. Am I understood?" "Wise Aizawa-san," the boy nodded, determined. Thank you." He ended up sending the boy off with a decent pair of gloves, a jacket, and some first aid equipment just in case. He hesitated last minute before looking back. "Kid, before you go." The boy paused and was startled when a jelly packet smacked him in the face. "Eat that before you start running. It basically qualifies as a meal. I personally survive off them." The boy looked at it, pausing before reading it. "Apple spice and cinnamon?" the boy inquired. "It's a good starting point. I'll get you addicted to them," he assured with a Cheshire grin. He was delighted when it got a giggle in response. "All right, kiddo. Text Hizashi if you need something. He'll be waking up in an hour or so." Thank you, Aizawa-sen," the boy bowed. "Of course. Have a good training session." He thought, hesitated, before reaching out and ruffling the thick green curls and grinned when the kid leaned into his hand. "A meow meow indeed. Stay safe." "I will." The boy smiled wide and Shoyuta ushered him off. "Sleep well, Aizawa-sen." Of course, Izuku would never tell them what would actually happen during the sessions. Because who would believe him? The trash was a good enough excuse. It wasn't abuse. It wasn't abuse. "Deku, you've been exceptionally slow today. Surely you're not slacking off now, are you?" He barely dodged another punch. "Oh, of course not, all might," he promised. I would never. But I'd never want you to be unworthy of one for all, the man boomed with a laugh, but it sent a shiver down Izuku's spine. Lose one for all. Lose his spot in the hero course. Lose his spot in UA. Lose his rank as a ward of UA. Lose his home. Lose Yamada-san and Aizawa-san. I won't let you down. It didn't matter how many times the man made him throw up. It didn't matter if the man hit him. It didn't matter if the man berated him. All Might was right, he was always right. Because All Might was a hero. And he was just a Deku. A useless Deku that was given a great gift. A stupid, worthless Deku. A pathetic, weak, worthless, stupid, selfish, entitled brat. Worthless. One for all was his worth. He had to be worthy of it. That's what he told himself as he wrapped the fresh bruises on his torso. Aizawa and Yamada might notice any bruises. They weren't like, "Mom. Izuku, what have I said about playing rough with the other kids? You can't keep doing this. I understand that it's hard to understand, but you need to stop antagonizing them. Can you help me wrap it at least? It hurts, Mom. Don't you cry, Izuku. This was your fault. If you want something to cry about, I'll give you something to cry about." He had to be worthy. He'd prove himself worth their love. All kids deserve love, Izuku. There's nothing you can do to make that untrue. Her love being conditional was unreasonable and mean. Yamada-san wouldn't say that if he knew the truth about Izuku. All Might his mom, they saw him for what he was. Useless. A burden. A vessel. Trash to mold. "We care about you, kiddo. We'd take you any day." It wasn't realistic thinking. He smiled at the large bruise on his ribcage. There was one fact that Aizawa-san and Yamada-san didn't understand yet, but it was okay. Because they'd figure it out. He wasn't a person. He was a Deku. He hadn't been a person since he was people deserve kindness. Things like him don't. Nedzu and Aizawa got things organized on the professional end while Hizashi took the initiative in taking care of Izuku. The kid clearly needed some love and they had time to give it to him. Once school ended, Izuku followed him back to the teacher's lounge before placing down his papers. "All right, kiddo. You and I are headed to the store," he grinned, moving a hand up to shake out the stiff updo. "Does that work?" "We are headed to the store?" the boy asked, tilting his head and looking far too much like a confused kitten. "Didn't you and Aizawa-san go grocery shopping on Friday?" Hizashi had almost forgotten that the kid had picked up their schedule. "Not the grocery shop," he smiled. "We gotta pick you up some necessities, you dig? Shampoo, conditioner, toothbrush, a brush, maybe something for those curls," Hizashi listed off. Izuku's eyes widened. But I don't have money for all the dash." "You remember how Sho and I are your guardians in this?" the kid nodded. "That makes it our job to pay for that. You don't gotta worry about it. Plus, with how much you help around the house, you can consider it like a paycheck." "Yeah." He gave a thumbs to the kid who looked a bit worried still. "Are you sure?" I don't really need dash." "Izuku," Hizashi gently cut him off. "I promise. It's fine. As your guardians in the ward program, it's our job. We won't be doing any major shopping, but you need some stuff, lil listener." Izuku looked up at him with wide eyes and Hizashi hummed before plopping himself down on the couch, gesturing for Izuku to do the same. "Shopping can be a bit stressful for Sho and I, so we like to make lists. Make sure we get what we need, but if we see something else, we can get it too, you dig? Would that make it a bit easier?" Hizashi pulled a small notebook from his pocket, offering it to the kid who stared at it for a few moments, before hesitantly reaching out and taking it from Hizashi's hands and pulling out his own pen. "All right, I'm gonna list some things off. Can you write them down for me?" Izuku looked down before nodding silently, clicking the pen. "Shampoo, conditioner, body soap, toothpaste, toothbrush, curl cream, brush," Hizashi started, peeking over to make sure Izuku was keeping up. Sure enough he was. "Razor, mouthwash, floss, fine tooth comb, a curly hairbrush. That's all the bathroom stuff I can think of." Izuku looked at the list, reading it over once before looking at him. That feels like a lot. "But those are the necessities," Hizashi smiled softly. "Sho and I have our own. But since we have our own bathroom, you need that for the bathroom closer to your room in our house. Why mention dash? The boy paused, collecting himself. You mentioned I'd come with you and Aizawa-san on the weekends? That is correctamundo, he nodded. If there was another UA ward, we'd be less worried, but we don't want to leave you all alone on campus, you dig? B, because I might do something? Izuku tilted his head. Hisashi rolled his eyes playfully. Yes, because the biggest threat to our defense on UA is a green-haired cinnamon roll, he snorted, which got the boy to go red. No, it's so you don't get lonely. You'll already spend quite a bit of the week alone. It's a bit better for you to at least spend some time away from school. Did Aizawa-san leave campus on the weekends? Izuku asked softly and Hisashi nodded. He did indeed. He spent his weekends at Ned's off-campus home. It's a bit of a more forested area, but it did wonders for his agility, Hisashi smiled. If you don't feel up to it, you don't have to, kiddo. But we're leaving the offer and encouraging you to come with us on the weekends. Don't want your second home feeling like a prison cell. That makes sense. The boy ducked his head in contemplation. But I'm Dash. Not a bother or inconvenience, Hisashi affirmed. Shoyuta and I are doing this of our own free will and we are happy to have you, kiddo. You bring a bit more life to the flat, you know? That got the boy going even more red as he hid his face in his hands. It was very sweet. All right, kiddo. Let's keep down our list. All right. A few pairs of clothes, a new bag and a laptop. A laptop? Ending up at the mall was not in Izuku's calculations, and by the sadistic smile on Aizawa's face, it was the original plan. Hisashi grinned. Welcome to the mall. Hisashi chirped. Where we're buying things. Izuku paused and turned to them slowly. I don't have moan dash. Our treat, Aizawa cut in. Izuku tried to interject but was interrupted. Because we're your sponsors. It's our job, kid. I don't dash. He tucked his bag a bit to his chest, looking nervous. Maybe first we should get you a new bag, Hisashi hummed. I don't mean to be rude, but your bag is in tatters. Izuku grimaced, clutching his yellow bag a bit closer to himself. I've had it since I was a kid, he murmured softly. I'm not saying you have to get rid of it, Hisashi reassured, smiling. But don't you think a new bag could be good? With how much you carry in your bag, I'm worried it's going to break. Better to have another just in case, you know? I suppose, he muttered, carefully loosening the grip on his bag. Hisashi and Shoyuta patiently waited. It feels wrong? To get rid of? You don't need to get rid of it, Shoyuta reaffirmed. But another, sturdier bag could be helpful. He considered that for several minutes before he carefully took a deep breath. Okay. His gaze moved to the floor before he said, Could I get one like yours, Aizawa-san? Aizawa paused, Hisashi passing a glance with a barely smothered giggle. That sounds good with me, kid, he huffed. I remember where I bought it. Come on, let's go get you a messenger bag. The day was a fight in itself. Every item was highly debated until either it was bought, a win for the Yamazawa couple, or it was put back, a win for the kid. Luckily, he didn't even try to argue when the necessities, instead attempting to just get cheaper products, which the attempt was smothered by Hisashi. Kiddo. Hisashi chirped, looking at the kid. Izuku held a cheap shampoo in his hands and Hisashi was gentle to pluck it from his hands, before putting it back on the shelf and replacing it with another. For your hair type, this one will be best. That other one will dry out your hair and make it all crunchy. Eek. He smiled. The student ducked his head, carefully placing the new item into the cart without an argument. I tried all the cheaper products when I was younger. Let me tell you, not worth their price. But the more expensive products are? Izuku asked hesitantly. Undoubtedly. He gave a thumbs up. That's what Shoyuta uses since his hair is all curly too. I can't tell you how many times I've thrown away his attempts at getting cheap products. Makes his hair all frizzy and dry and it makes me so sad. Hisashi practically dragged his husband by the collar to be in front of the boy as he showed him his hair. The damage from those products is still being fixed. Zashi, Aizawa looked to his husband, long and suffering. My hair is fine. I'm not letting the kid pick up your awful habits, he huffed, proceeding to push Aizawa away and smiling at Izuku. While being money-conscious is good, if something isn't working well, it's not worth the price. He nodded, looking back at the product in the cart, before Hizashi saw the reluctance of the price finally wanes away. Now, let's find you a good soap. Plenty of smells to choose from. I recommend this one brand dash. Izuku ended up picking the wildflower scent. Finally, hours had passed and they ended up back at the Yamazawa household and Izuku looked around. Well, kiddo, since you'll spend half your time in the dorms and half the time here, we thought you'd want to go put your products away. He offered a smile to the boy. Nedzu probably already bought doubles of all the products and sent them in a little basket to your room. Ah, really? Izuku's wide-eyed amazement was adorable. How did that so cool? How did he know? We have no idea. Hizashi chirped back, equally enthusiastic. He just knows. The messages Shoyuta sent were entirely irrelevant to this. Izuku proceeded into a ramble about high specs and the ramifications for intelligence-altering quirks, which Hizashi took no time to get into. Within the hour, the kid was asleep in his room. The long day of shopping had, undoubtedly, taken it out of him. He snored, slightly drooling on the new sheets with all four cats surrounding him while Hizashi and Shoyuta sipped tea on the table. He's ours, Zashi, Shoyuta reported without a hint of inflection, sipping his tea. Hizashi just nodded, a gentle smile on his face. Of course he is. Shoyuta and Hizashi were relaxing in their room when they heard it. Shoyuta was knocked out via his sleeping pills while Hizashi was unwinding with a book when the cats came running in. The distant sound of faint cries echoed quietly through the flat. Toffee was practically screaming at him while Sardine and Martha were making it their mission to jump on each of his organs. He pushed them off in an instant, however, quickly walking off to the room with the cries. He wasn't surprised when he saw Izuku, tossing and turning in his bed, tears streaming down his face. The boy was pale as a ghost, soft whimpers and cries of, "Please, I'm sorry," being the only words escaping. Hizashi sighed a bit before walking over and sitting at the boy's side and gently beginning to work on shaking him awake. "Kiddo," he spoke gently. It didn't get a reply. "Izuku," he said a bit gentler but a bit louder. It took a few minutes for Izuku to come to, eyes red and puffy while he panted. "Hey there, hey, it's okay." He moved slowly, choreographing his movements as he gently took one of Izuku's hands and began to rub circles into the palm. A small grounding gesture as the boy finally looked at him and processed he was there. "Why, Yamada-san?" It was soft, hoarse, ruined by the sobs from earlier, but Hizashi paid it no mind. "I'm right here, kiddo," he assured. The boy sniffed, lifting a hand to rub aggressively into his face, clearly trying to stop the stream of tears. "I'm sorry, I'm so sorry, I probably woke you up, I'm so dash." "Hey!" Hizashi gently cut him off, gently grabbing the boy's hand from his face and bringing it down. "It's okay. You're okay, Izuku. You didn't wake me up, kiddo, I was just reading." He wasn't sure if it helped or made it worse by the increase in the boy's tears as he barely choked down sobs. "I'm sorry, I'm fine now, I just dash." Hizashi looked down at the boy's trembling hands and the paleness of his face, even in the dark room. "I'm being stupid, I dash." "Kiddo," Hizashi interrupted again. "Can I give you a hug?" The boy froze, wide green eyes looking at him. "What? Izuku, can I give you a hug?" he repeated softly, carefully readjusting himself. "I think, in my very professional opinion, that's what it looks like you need right now. So I'm asking if I can give you a hug." The boy blinked once more, thinking it over for a moment before softly replying. "Okay." Hizashi waited for the boy to open his arms, before moving to gently pull the boy into his, tucking Izuku's head against his shoulder and hiding him from the rest of the room. He held him there in silence for a moment before speaking low. "You can cry it all out," he whispered. "No one will see you. Not even me. I promise. You can let it all out, Hizashi. I know it hurts. It'll build up if you let it." There were a few moments of silence before he felt a stuttering chest and could hear the soft, unhindered sobs in his chest. Quiet wails of agony and built-up stress, and Hisashi only held him firm, rubbing circles into the boy's back as what seemed to be a long-standing build-up that could only be described as anguish. The cats sat at the door, all facing away as if keeping away any prying eyes and defending the boy as something in him collapsed and shattered. Hisashi held him for the near 45 minutes as the breakdown worked its course, before finally, the boy began to calm, slumping into him. Shaky breaths and hoarse whines of exhaustion were the only indications the boy was still awake. Hisashi's shirt was soaked with tears and he just smiled, finally moving one hand up to run gently through the back of green curls. "You've been holding that storm in for a while, haven't you?" Hisashi asked gently, not stopping his gentle comfort for the kid, because Izuku was a kid, not even 16, as he spotted the clock. He was slow, running one more hand before leaning down a bit so the kid was more laid down on him. Izuku was now clung to him, limply laying on him the rest of the way. "Rest up, kiddo. I'll be here when you wake up," he assured gently. He could feel the telltale signs of the kid dozing off finally into a dreamless sleep, finally calmed and comforted. Hisashi leaned back against the wall, sighing fondly at the kid before laying his head back and closing his eyes. He woke up to an obnoxious alarm, staring at Izuku's phone with an irritation that was rare for him. It was 4:30 in the DM morning, if that clock was right. He looked at his kid who was comfortably snoozing in his lap, before huffing and quickly swiping the phone, turning off the alarm and turning on "Do Not Disturb" before setting it back. Shoyuta could wake them later. With another gentle ruffle of green curls, he leaned back and went back to bed. "Zashi!" A soft voice was calling. He groaned, feeling a harsh crick in his neck as he cracked an eye open. His glasses were still on? "Hey Zashi. It's 7. Too early," he muttered back, closing his eyes. He heard a vaguely amused snort from his husband and cracked his eyes back open. Shoyuta was already in his hero gear and sitting on the side of the bed. He passed his glance down to see Izuku, who was still asleep with his arms around Hisashi's waist and using his legs as pillows. He sighed fondly and leaned down to place a hand in the curls, the only reprieve of being awake so goddamn early. "Careful, Hisashi. You're starting to sound like me," Shoyuta teased with a small smirk. "Rough night." "Kid wasn't out till 3, he offered back, earning a wince from the man. "Yeah. I'll write him a pass out of homeroom and English," Shoyuta spoke, leaning down to place a kiss on his husband's lips, which Hisashi gladly returned. "I'll cover your class until the 3rd PRD. "Have I ever told you how much I loved you?" He smiled softly to the man who huffed in amusement. "I mean, I'd hope you married me more than for tax benefits," he snorted before leaning down to ruffle Izuku's curls, who barely even stirred, just pushed into the warm hand. Shoyuta smiled softly down at the kid, earning an equally domestic smile from Hisashi. "I'll see you two at school later, alright?" "Alright, Sho. I love you." "I love you too," Shoyuta gave a small smile before heading out. He allowed the silent and serene environment to comfort him for a few moments, relishing in the morning light and the domestic scene. Finally, he attempted to move. Hisashi was careful in attempting to dislodge himself from the kid but seemed to have forgotten one major thing. The kid had a DMN death grip, built like FANG brick house. "Izuku," Hisashi gently coaxed, earning a small groan from the boy who tucked into him further like a cat wanting to be left alone to nap. "I know you're tired, kiddo, but it's time to wake up." A tired green eye peered up at him, uncomprehending. His eyes blinked at 2 different times as he stared at Hisashi. "Yeah, I know," he smiled fondly. "You've got another hour you can sleep, alright? But can you let me go? I'll kidnap you a cat to snuggle with." This seemed to be the right thing to say as slowly, the boy moved to disconnect himself from the other man before staring in expectation. As promised, Hisashi grabbed the nearest cat, and offered it as a sacrifice to the sleepy kitten, the sleepy kid. Totally not also a cat. Or in a cat cult. Izuku took the cat before flopping himself back down, holding the purring creature to his chest with a contented purr-like noise that had Hisashi briefly wondering if the kid actually was a cat. Further investigation would be needed, he supposed. He gently tucked the boy back in just in time for the other cats to hop up and cuddle with the boy. It was a very sweet scene as the faintest of smiles spread back over the kid's face, clearly content. He was silent to remove himself from the room, already heading to the bathroom to start getting ready for the day. After an hour and 10 minutes, both Hisashi and Izuku were ready for the day. Izuku was clearly still tired but had insisted on coming to school when asked, and Hisashi was all done up and ready to go. Shoyuta had left the two of them the car, to Hisashi's relief. Public transportation was hell on earth for someone like him. Izuku's concealer hid the night away, but the slight dullness in his eyes gave it away to Hisashi. On their way out, they were delighted to see 2 jelly pouches left out with a note. Hisashi and Izuku, you guys are probably gonna run late, so I left these out. Let the kid pick which one he wants first, Zashi. See you two later. Shoyuta. Hisashi raised an eyebrow, offering the jelly pouches to Izuku, who stared at them in shock. Clearly, he had already picked up on Shuta's possessive habits. His jelly pouches rarely left his own, so for him to willingly offer 2? Well, hell may have frozen over. Looks like we've got orange spice and raspberry pie. Which one do you want, kiddo? Izuku looked at him for a moment, before looking away. Why can pick first, Yamada-san? Izuku attempted to insist, but his eyes had unconsciously flicked over staring at orange spice. Hisashi smiled fondly, before offering the flavor to the kiddo. Raspberry pie wasn't his favorite, but it wasn't the worst. Here, kiddo, he placed it into the kid's hand, who looked at him with wide eyes. He wasn't so good at hiding his excitement as he opened it and began to sip at it, lighting up at the flavor. Hisashi had to agree, it was one of the best flavors. Let's get going, you dig? All right, Yamada-san. School, luckily, was a quiet affair. Hisashi got to observe with a small smile as Izuku talked with some of his close friends. Uraraka, Ida, and Todoroki were all really sweet, and the boy clearly enjoyed their company. He looked happy. Something old and rotten eased in his chest, like a freshly cleaned wound. Maybe he didn't get to learn the happiness of life until later in life, but he could make sure Izuku saw them sooner. It was undeniable the boy suffered, but Hisashi could smile. Because Izuku could still smile. He was there, breathing, living, and laughing with his friends. Hisashi would fight any god to keep him smiling like that. Because Izuku Midoriya was his kid. Whether the kid knew it or not yet,